It is Tuesday, December 8th. This is our Manhattan City Commission work session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first item on our agenda tonight is the joint maintenance facility, and I believe we have several presenters. We'll start off with Rob Ott, our Director of Public Works.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners, Mayor, thank you. Yes, we have several presenters tonight. I'll get started off with just the first two slides, and then we'll have Casey Smithenson come up, possibly to even drag Eddie Estes up here, Park and Rec Director. We'll have Jeff Davis and Dan Tyson from the Street, Fleet, and Stormwater. We'll also have Norm Francis, our Utility Superintendent, and Patrick Schwab from BBN. And then I'll kind of wrap things up at the tail end, and we'll see where the discussion goes this evening. So our agenda, we're going to cover our existing facilities, and that's kind of why I'm bringing some of the folks that live and work in those facilities to help kind of refresh memories. And Patrick will talk a little bit about the recommendations from phase one. And let's see. And what this evening our agenda is to cover some of the background information on the existing facilities that are various divisions we're working in today, and how we've developed schematic designs and preliminary cost estimates for the new facility near the wastewater treatment plant. Just kind of a reminder, this project first started in 2016 with a selection team to do a feasibility study and look at best management practices for municipal services facilities. Since 2016, we have purchased real estate for the project. We have selected McHale Gordon as our contractor to work in concert with our design team of BBN with the development of the guaranteed maximum price documents that we hope to bring to you all sometime next year. This new facility will hold approximately 100 full-time employees and up to 40 seasonal employees. There are three major divisions of the city of Manhattan. We all have a wide range of services and things that we provide to the community, everything from mowing parks, fixing water mains, making sure sanitary sewer mains flow, fixing streets. Our fleet repairs everything from fire trucks down to pickup trucks as well. So we take care of the entire citywide fleet. We do have some specific discussion points that I'm seeking some feedback from the commission tonight. Those points will be summarized again at the end of the presentation to give commissioners an opportunity to provide feedback on those topics. So with that, I'd like to ask Casey Smithenson if he would come up here, please, and kind of kick us off with the El Paso projects. Casey.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for having us, and we appreciate the opportunity to come talk about our current facilities and potentially our the new facility that we're going to move into. The El Paso, the Park Shop is what we commonly known as, is at 1417 El Paso Lane. Been there many years. Obviously, you see on the slide, it was built in 1960. That was prior to, I believe, the city owning it. City bought it as a used facility and then adapted it multiple times to what it is today. Obviously, with a renovation again in addition in 1993, which added our wood shop, which is in the upper right-hand picture there. That's how it looks today, and I'll come in a little bit more. But obviously, that's our snow gear. It's so basically our shops take on multiple duties depending on the time of year. And as you can tell, our wood shop is not being used for wood construction right now because all our snow equipment's sitting in it. So. But just kind of starting here, we have, I think Rob mentioned, we have about 30 full-time employees based out of the park shop. That is myself, the park mechanic, which is also our city locksmith, an executive secretary for our division, Parks Division, and then we also have forestry, horticulture, and city parks and facilities. So The only ones that are still remote out of this shop is their cemeteries. They're based out of the both Sunrise and Sunset satellite shops. We also, in the summer, primarily in the summer season, when we have seasonal staff, when we have them hired on, we bring 15, give or take 15 or more seasonals out of this shop as well. So that takes our number up to 45 or so out of this one facility. So as you see, for multiple areas that the folks are using. Space is premium. We use it for a lot of different things. As you see a bay space right there, that's where our forestry section actually meets, just because there's no room to, each crew has to have their morning where we lay out workload or work lists and get what needs to be done for the day and passing on information. And so they're all separate, and forestry just unfortunately gets moved out into the shop, and it works, but it's not the best place. Plus, it takes up space where we could be putting equipment in if we needed to. So, the other thing, there's just a tight locker room space for that amount of guys or staff. Restrooms, very, very lacking of restrooms. I think several of you have been down in our facility, and for the amount of people, there's not, that type of space that we wouldn't build a place that way now with that less amount of break room. Restrooms and locker rooms. So I'll go one more slide. I'll jump through there. I may bounce back and forth here a little bit because I follow along. Here on the slide on the right actually is one of our primary break rooms. That's where the park section primarily meets. There's 15 in that work group. And as you can see, that actually is also our office space for our executive secretary. And then there's 2 computer workstations for those additional 30 people that don't have a specific, or about 25 of those people that non-supervisors that don't have their own computer. So we have 2 computer workstations for that bigger group of guys. So we try to make room for them, but it's just, again, there's not enough to give them all space that they need to for workspace. So. Okay, so as you can see, the middle picture, a little bit more of the forestry on the left, but the middle picture is just the amount of facilities and equipment that we operate with. It takes space just to maintain the limited amount of parts that we do keep on hand. But with every facility, every new facility, they hand you these massive amount of books and then extra stuff, or here's your extra carpet tiles or your extra light bulbs. We have to house all that for all the facilities. If they don't have room within the facility, say City Hall, Discovery Center or Animal Shelter, we have some of those specialty items that we house, but we have to have a place in dry storage, tempered storage where it can go. And that's where you see we start kind of shoehorning, filling things up that really needs, and it makes it not necessarily safe for the staff. This in here, I'll jump back to the parking lot. Parking lot and access, it's falling apart. It's actually trip hazards. We actually run into it as a safety hazard for staff, but not only for it raises the chances of our own vehicles hitting our own vehicles, just because it's so tight when you're trying to bring trucks and trailers in and put them in place. Unload and parking is a chore. You can see they're double, and sometimes in ours they're triple stacked. It's not efficient. Our work group, we have added, we've been living off of some tier 2s, but we don't have a truck for all our employees. We run off a lot of, that's why we have our satellite shops, because we run a lot of our staff being at these satellite shops where they operate off UTVs or utility vehicles, gators, or our motors. So we don't have a truck for everybody, but just in the numbers that we have, we operate off of additional tier 2 vehicles, which is those that have been replaced, but they're just waiting to be moved clear out of our fleet. So, but we live off of them just because we have so many tasks that we have to go do. So it takes vehicles to get people to where they need to work. But with that's just kind of the position we're at. But again, repair work, this is a facility that we are suggesting that we keep, to keep as a satellite shop. My primary operations, on at least how we operate for our mowing in the summer season and our snow removal in the winter season, is I stage our equipment where it needs to be, the mowers and gators, And that's why this is a pivotal piece to have in the core, because we have, Northeast Park runs our east side mowing crew. Annenberg Park is where we stack our west crew. And in the core is right here, El Paso needs to be retained, so we can do all our snow deployment from it in the winter. And then we also, that's our third crew that we run for mowing in the city as well. So, but also just the base. When you get in all that equipment, right now, a majority of it sits outside, and you're gonna hear it probably more than just from me tonight. The amount of equipment, trucks are one thing, but all our specialty equipment, we've got bucket trucks to specialty mowers to excavators, most of that sits outside today. And that, with our CIP dollars, the way they are or are not there, we can't replace those, so they need to be indoors. We need to protect that equipment from moisture and from UV. I mean, we've got hydraulic lines on our aerial bucket trucks that, I mean, we've got someone going up 75 feet in the air, but yet we have a truck that sits outside 24/7 through all sorts of weather, that we're relying on those hydraulic lines to hold. So granted, we have replaced that truck this year, so that's a good thing, but it's how often do we get to replace those? So that's where those bigger trucks Forester trucks will move to the joint facility and some of that outdoor covered storage. But it frees up some of those spaces in our El Paso shop and our other satellite shops where we can get other equipment, small equipment, inside bay space that we can protect our investment. And I think that's my biggest push of where we're at, because again, some of the other guys that get up there, they probably aren't going to keep their current spaces. But we have enough equipment that we need to get indoors that we can't take it all to the joint facility. So there is a piece there's a reason why we need to keep El Paso, and again, it will over time need some dollars put back into it that right now is not part of this project. So, but I do want to be upfront that it is a pivotal piece of our operation, my operation, and how we deploy crews year round. So, just check. Really, otherwise, I'd really be up to any questions if you have for me, and I don't know if you want to wait to the end for questions or you want each of us to. I'd be happy to answer them now, and if you have any. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions right now?
If you have any idea of that El Paso property, when, it looks like that, at least the parking or the surface would have to be fixed, replaced, resurfaced, whatever. Any idea where that would fit in the timeline that maybe in your head? How many more years can we get out of what we have?
We're going to need to patch some places, but we probably need to save it until we move the majority of our people and our equipment to the joint facility, where we can lighten up the use. We just can't. Right now, it's very hard to probably shut our operation down so we can do that parking lot full repair. So it would probably be at opening of the new facility and or after we get there, would be my guess for dollars. Not that I want to put it off. We've attempted, we've looked at it several fiscal years here, but it's just, we put it off because of not only budgets, but also timing. We know this other facility was potentially coming, so let's lighten up our use, because it will impact our operations for the length of time that we have to clear the whole compound. And so BBN also they're actually pinning, and that was this other drawing, and I'll jump back to right here. They're working on, during this process, we are going to get a plan set to put on the shelf for not only the interior of the building, just basically realign walls, and we need less office spaces. We need more storage bays. So BBN will have something to put on the shelf for that building as well, not just the parking lot. And they've actually designed, this is not exactly it, but they're working on a design that changes some flow. So when we go do that, we make it the most use of the square footage that we have. Obviously, we need less employee parking when we move a bigger chunk of the employees out to the joint facility. So we'll have that plan on the shelf and be ready to go when we have an opportunity, funding and time actually to do that. So good question, thank you.
This, Linda Morse, this facility is listed as having a value of $241,000.
Okay. Yep.
and seems to be in the mix to potentially generate, by selling it, $1.6 million. So you're making the case, though, that it would not be sold. And my question is, can part of it be sold? Like, I know there's a lower level where there's an employee parking area down there. And I just wondered if there's a kind of a separation that's possible. Because I would be interested in recovering as much money as we can. But I just didn't realize this was, your proposal was to retain it. So my question is, what about selling part of it?
I don't know if we have made more discussions other than we were talking about keeping it. I've talked to the neighboring properties beside us, obviously before the joint facility is,
Yeah.
we were looking whether we expand where we're at as well. I think everybody has in the room here. Those gentlemen, actually that gentleman that owned the property there, he was basically, he either wanted to buy all of ours or he wanted us to buy his. So it's limited access. We run into that every day on deliveries, and because we're on essentially an alley and a dead end off 14th Street. So I think it could be divided, but what would go there, I don't know. I think we did vacate the 14th Street has been vacated because that's where our forestry
Right.
section parks. So I don't know if anybody else has any
Yeah.
comment on that.
So I think I understand your question, Commissioner, which is, can a portion of it be sold? I actually had, a short, I don't know if you remember.
Well, I can wait if you're going to be talking about it later.
Yeah, I do have a
Okay.
section on this
That's
later.
fine, thank
so-
you. Uh-huh.
But it's a good question. I understand
Yeah.
what you're getting at. Could part of it be sold?
We're scaling it down.
Okay. Eddie, did you want to?
I just wanted to, let's go back. Yeah. Did you all notice this is 60 slides on this PowerPoint?
We just kept reading.
I simply want to comment. I spent nearly 10 years down at the El Paso property before Casey was here. And this picture, I think, is very telling. We've grown staff since I was there to a certain, not a lot, but to a certain extent, but enough that it pushed staff out in the garage bay. Currently, Casey is down 7 full-time staff. And this sort of picture has a direct effect on morale and recruitment and retaining staff when we're showing them potentially, what their work conditions are. We've made pretty substantial investments to improvements of facilities, whether it's the Park and Recreation Office over in City Hall, our new recreation facilities that are under construction. Even, it wasn't that long ago when we improved the zoo facility, the Nature Exploration Center, because we recognize that those existing facilities, or the lack of those facilities, were important and were necessary and were needed in order for us to provide the services that are needed for the community. This picture is very telling. We have every bit as need, if not greater need, for improvements so that Casey and Rob staff can continue to provide what we all recognize as essential services for the community. That picture is not going to get it done with the current conditions that we have. So I also want to say the picture on the right is different from when I was down there as well. We work different now. Electronics and computers are a part of the everyday work of Casey's crew now. And it's somewhat embarrassing to say he's got 2 workstations inside his break room where they also eat their lunch and they do their morning meetings, and expects, all of his staff to be able to access just those 2 computers. When so much of what we do today on a daily basis revolves around electronic communications, how staff can clock in and clock out their timesheets, how they can keep track of their accruals, how they can keep track of their leave accruals. Everything is electronic based now. And we're not doing our staff what is necessary with 2 locations in the break room for them to be able to access those computers. So we certainly have a tremendous need, and I just want to point that out. You know, for the 15 years that I have been with the city, that facility is getting smaller every day. So, just some relevant experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, I just had a few things that I wanted to say before Dan goes with the slideshow. I've been working out of the 620 South Juliet building since '86. Since then, the employees have about doubled, more than doubled on equipment, you know, trucks, skid steers. We didn't have skid steers when I first started, but yeah, kind of the same things along what Casey was saying. We're really running out of space. Things are crowded. At times we store some of our equipment out at the airport because we just don't have the space down there to do it. So with that, I'll just go ahead and let Dan go through the slides, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Could you state your name real quick?
Excuse me?
Could you state your name real quick?
I can't hear.
State your name.
Oh, Jeff Davis.
Jeff Davis. Thanks,
Yes.
Jeff.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Dan Tyson. I'm the Street Fleet Stormwater Supervisor. Go through the slides here. I've been with the city. I'm working on my 17th year with the city. Started out as a mechanic in the fleet shop, worked my way up as a supervisor to where I am now. So this is our fleet maintenance building. It was erected in 1980, and the fleet was roughly a third of the size it is today. And the building has obviously not grown any. It was designed as a three large bay and one small bay shop with a small office, and it originally had 2 bathrooms, a men's and a women's bathroom. That's been converted to just one single bathroom because they needed room for tool storage and etc. It has been also modified to have a welding and fabrication bay on the end, so that limits the equipment and vehicle repair down to 2 large bays and 1 small bay. As Rob stated earlier, this facility services the entire city fleet. I mean, anything from fire trucks all the way down to the handheld gas-powered saws, things like that. Currently has 2 mechanics and 1 supervisor and 1 welder in it. Inside, as some of you have seen in person on tours, it gets very crowded when you get large vehicles in there. The fire truck on the right, you can see there's about 6 foot of distance in between where the ladder is and the ceiling that you have to maneuver it out of the way to be able to get the cab up for servicing or any other kind of engine repairs or transmission repairs. On the left, you can see one of our street sweepers in there with the hopper up. And to do any work on those, even just normal maintenance services, that kind of thing, you have to get the hopper up. There's not much room for error in that either. The equipment continues to get larger every year, it seems like. I don't know why every manufacturer thinks they have to make them bigger, but they do. We currently have a couple vehicles that actually have water tanks on them for what they do, and they have to be full of water or they won't come in our garage doors. There's literally 1 inch of clearance to come in the garage doors. Fire department has actually purchased a new rescue vehicle out at the airport that does not come in our doors. It's too big, too wide and too tall, so it has to be worked on either out at the airport or out in our parking lot. This is that same fire truck. You can see the outriggers have to be out to be able to deploy the ladder to get it out of the way. And when those are out, there is no room to walk around it. It's really crowded. And as you can see in the pictures, all of our tools and jacks and brooms, cleaning supplies for the shop, everything has to be stored in between the bays or around the workspace. So that just takes up even more room. On the left is, it's kind of hard to see in that picture, but is our 55-gallon barrels of fluids that we have to have for vehicles such as oil, antifreeze, that kind of thing. And that's where it has to be stored because we have no other place for it. So you're constantly working around that in your workspace also. The middle picture is our tool room. That's where the tools, the larger tools, especially tools that the city does provide, are stored and kept. As you can see, we have outgrown our shelf space, so they start encroaching out on the floor inside there. On the right-hand side is a picture of our weld and fabrication bay. There also, we have to keep the steel inside to keep it from rusting. And so that all has to be stored inside that same workspace. It's very crowded. On the other side of the street at 620 South Juliet, that's where our street and stormwater divisions are housed. It's an old Quonset-style building that was originally designed and built in approximately 1940 as an oil distribution building for an oil distribution company. It was designed as a drive-in loading area for their oil barrels. It was not designed to have offices, break room, that sort of thing in there. It was later modified by the city of Manhattan for that. Next one. Inside that building, as you can see on the left, that's where our executive secretary is, also our dispatcher. She has to share her workspace. It's not really an office or a reception area, it's just kind of a room you walk into. She has to share that with our stormwater crew leader, because we have no other place to put him. So that's a crowded, very crowded office. On the right is our break room area that we have for 30 employees to use. That's where we have to have, if we have meetings back when we used to have in-person meetings, that's where we'd have to have everybody for any type of meetings, trainings. We have no good place. We have to get a stand-up screen to use a projector. It's really hard for people to see around the corner, that sort of thing. And there, inside that break room area is our one computer for our employees to get on to check their time cards or check their emails, that sort of thing that the city requires. This is the shop area that we have in that building. On the left, you can see right when I took this picture, it was empty of vehicles. Usually there's about 6 or 8 one-ton trucks stacked in there like sardines. They were all out actually doing something when I took this picture. But you can see that the employee lockers that they keep their personal stuff in, their work clothes, that sort of thing, is along the far side there. But it's mixed in with that's where they have to keep all of their crew's tools and equipment that they use, so it's mixed in with that. This is also where we have to wash our trucks in the winter, wash the salt and grime off of them when we're out, after we've been out clearing the streets, so overspray from that gets on everything. On the right-hand side is one of the corners of the shop where we have our tire machine, and there's also some more crew tools stuffed in there. We have some other bench grinders and that sort of thing in this corner. And that also gets overspray from washing all the trucks and equipment off. Outside is very crowded. This is a left-hand picture, is a picture of, you can see the fuel islands in the back. They're really close proximity to the driveway, and on the left-hand side is where the personal vehicles, personal parking is for our employees. So there's a lot of interaction between personal property and city property that basically leaves us open for quite a bit of liability, I think, as far as that goes. On the right-hand side is where we kind of park as many of our vehicles outside as we can around the yard. This is our salt storage at this facility. On the left, the dome is back there, and then on the left of that picture, underneath that white tarp is our outside salt storage, which is obviously not a perfect scenario. You don't want to get a lot of rain and snow on top of salt. It turns into cement that we have to spend time breaking up before we can load it and use it in our trucks. On the right-hand side is our sweeper shed that's also on this property. We actually have 3 sweepers we have to stuff in this. One of them was at maintenance at this time for getting repairs. That is a very crowded area. And the doorway is fairly small, and you kind of have to back in there and snake your way around all the other equipment to get the sweepers in there. When it's time to leave for the day with that many employees in that small area, as you can see in these two pictures, this is employees leaving for the day. It gets really congested. People are coming through there trying to pull out of the parking spots. It's just really dangerous. Here's a picture of the back of our covered storage for our salt trucks and spreaders. It's kind of difficult to see at this angle, but when they have the plows and spreaders all loaded on them, they can't even fit in there. These are parked double deep, so there's actually another row of trucks in front of these that you can see. And as you can see in some of these, the back ends of them are actually sticking out of the building. On the left is one of our spreaders and plows, and this is just to kind of show you that we have found every nook and cranny we can to store our equipment in. This is in between our salt dome and our sweeper shed. Any available real estate we can find where we're at, we have stuff stored. On the right-hand side is our street sweeper dumping its leaves at the dump site there at this facility. This facility also holds the primary dump site for our street sweeping that we have to come in throughout the day and dump at, and then we also have to haul off with our dump trucks. That's all the slides I have for that. You guys have any questions?
Thanks, Dan and Jeff. Are there any questions for either one of them? Okay, seeing none.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Norm, if you want to come on. Scott French, are you online?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Go ahead, Scott, we can hear you. I didn't know if you wanted to say something real quick.
Sure, this is Scott French, Fire Chief. Thank you for having me, Mayor and Commissioners, and I just want to echo the points that I think everybody is seeing with these pictures, but obviously from my standpoint of view, fire truck maintenance is a critical function that these guys do for us, and the facilities are absolutely inadequate for being able to work on fire trucks. We have 3 different fire trucks that will not fit in there. Last year, one of our airport firefighter vehicles, they actually had to repair a pump on, and they had to put up a tent in the parking lot for a week to work on that in 95 to 100 degree weather. I mean, what these guys are doing with the facilities they have is truly remarkable and a testament to the people that we hire. So I wanted to make sure I had the opportunity to let you know that they have done everything they can, and it's time that the city look to upgrade these facilities. It's crucial. You know, even to work on this fire truck that they've got pictured here, you can't walk around it. It's hard to provide preventative maintenance on vehicles when it's with these kind of conditions. So a lot of times, and I don't blame the guys at the shop because they do their best, but there's no way that we can provide true preventative maintenance on these vehicles when this is the working conditions they're working in. And one thing I don't think Dan pointed out was when these trucks with the ladders have to be put in there, they lose that middle bay, especially if they have another big truck in there. Sometimes we can't bring our trucks in there, or they've got to get something fixed and moved out before they bring the fire truck in, because when a fire truck comes in, it takes up 2 different bays on them. It's either pushing all their equipment into that middle bay because of our outriggers, or the ladder overhang that's required. So there again, I just wanted to have the opportunity to talk about the facilities those guys are working in. And I think it's critical infrastructure that needs to be upgraded.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your comments. Next up is Norm Francis. As I mentioned earlier, Norm's our utility superintendent. Norm is down at 3131 Anderson, and I'll kind of let him speak to his couple slides.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Thanks for letting me speak. As Rob mentioned, I'm Norm Francis. I'm the utility superintendent for the city of Manhattan, and our location is at 3131 Anderson. which is the old Reeth Fire Station. I'm really here to talk about, we've done some upgrades to them facilities, but at the same time, I'm just here to talk about, I don't have a bunch of slides like the other guys, but I think it kind of tells the story with the equipment that we use, dump trucks, trailers, and the personal private parking that takes place that we have to go through with city equipment, which brings in safety concerns and liabilities. The other thing that I kind of want to touch base on is some of the inefficiencies at this location with where we have to take our vehicles to be serviced with vehicle maintenance. It's across town, not the most efficient approach to that, as well as just getting fuel, with the fuel island being located at the street department and we being located on the west side of town. Just in order for us to go get fuel, we got to drive across town or schedule work in the area to where we can fill up. So the safety concerns really are more so about liabilities with city employee parking and with our trucks. The picture on the left is a dump truck and a trailer that actually is making, I think there might have been one that kind of shows the site, Rob. Okay, here's the actual 3131 site where we do work in a one-way loop. We enter on the east side and we loop around and exit on the west side. That first picture on the left, this one is at the first pinch point right down here, if you can see the cursor, where we have to make that turn. These parking stalls here are city-owned vehicles. We park city-owned vehicles inside. In the heated building for sewer jet trucks that hold water to clean lines, open lines, and such. Down here we have city employee parking, private vehicles on this side, and private vehicles up here and here. We have 25 full-time employees and four seasonal employees, and currently with the when fully staffed, we do not have any parking. The seasonal employees have to park over in the shopping center parking lot over here. It's been pretty hard being fully staffed though, so there's a little more space than normal right now. But that's the first pinch point. This one here is at the second pinch point with the trailer, which is over here where this arrow is, where we have actually had to remove put no parking on this stall and this stall just so we can make the turn around to get around the private parking section, because we actually store some equipment along the curb over here on the west side of the property. We do not keep all of our equipment at this location. We do keep some stuff up the water treatment plant, which naturally is on the other side of town. As far as digging operations, dump truck, trailer, excavator, there's one or two of them that get stored over there, just so we have a little more room to do what we need to do, navigating through the site here. Oops, sorry about that. And then this one here is actually right down there at that first pinch point. That's a sewer jet truck that is backs in it daily. Backs in daily down here, and we have all these bays where service trucks are up here for water distribution, and then down towards the south end we have sewer jet trucks and our CCTV operations truck that parks in down here. So everything's pulling out, backing in a really tight quarters, as you can tell at these locations. So that was the main reason why I was wanting to speak tonight, and thanks, Rob, for giving me the opportunity to, was about the personal city employee parking compared to us traveling through with bigger required equipment to perform emergency services. So if you have any questions, I can answer.
Thank you, Norm.
Thank you.
I do have a question, Rob. We've put quite a bit of money into that buildings and property since we took it over, it seems to me. And I don't go back beyond 5 years. But
Go ahead.
how much in improvements have we made? Because I see the value that you have placed on it. And
Yes.
that's, which is great, but, I mean, we've put some money into it too.
No, you're absolutely correct, Commissioner. So that appraised value takes into account those improvements on the site. So the facility there, that's what that 665,000 at 3131 Anderson takes into account, is the value of those structures that are there. Obviously, and we're gonna talk about disposal of assets tonight. And we can kick around some different avenues that you might want me to go down, whether that's to sell as is, or whether we have a discussion about controlling the type of development that goes in there. So those would be some of the flexibility.
Well, I just wondered about the amount of money we put
Sure.
on it.
I have to go back and look, but I seem to remember the building that Norm was talking about was under 300,000 for the, go ahead, Randy. This is Randy DeWitt, Assistant Director of Public Works.
So yeah, the vehicle storage building, if I remember right, it was about $350,000 building. The site improvements we made to the overall site and the building when we first obtained it, that was when I first got here, and I want to say that was another several $100,000.
Yeah, that's what I
So,
thought.
and we've been able to make some improvements inside the building by adding locker room space and an ADA accessible restroom. So, yeah, we've made several $100,000 improvements to that facility. So, you know, we're kind of one of the divisions that have actually been blessed with the ability to make some improvements to our facility and help it to meet our current needs. But you know, as Norm mentioned, we store a lot of equipment off-site. He didn't mention that we actually have to store equipment out at our biosolids farm because we can't keep our largest sewer maintenance equipment out here, like our combo trucks with our.
Is there
vacuum
anything
ejectors.
unique to this building that you can't, or that is really specialized for water and wastewater, or whatever you do there?
No,
It's just a generic building,
It's office space, it's vehicle storage space, and it's material storage.
former fire station, yeah,
It was a retro, like everything we have.
right.
It was a retrofit to make best of what we were given as leftovers. So, Commissioner, any other
No,
questions?
I just had questions, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Patrick?
See, Rob, I wanted to ask just one question. That metal vehicle storage building, I think at one time we talked about that thing could be moved.
Yeah.
Is that financially viable, and would it work to, move that to the new site as a storage building? I mean, is it cost effective?
That's probably the biggest struggle that we've been having with that facility, is whether, because frankly, it's fine for one vehicle depth. That's it. Some of the outdoor storage that we're looking at is 2 vehicle depth. And that's covered, unheated, unconditioned space. For our indoor conditioned space, we've proposed, deeper bays and so forth. From what I've heard from Macau Gordon and in Patrick, you might spend just as much money building brand new as if you tried to move this and retrofit it. We certainly can continue to look at that.
Okay, if it's not cost effective, not worth doing, I just wanted to know if that'd been considered. Sounds like you've looked at it, appreciate it.
We've looked at it, and honestly, I don't know. It's not a huge cost to benefit right now, from what I've heard from the team.
Well, Hattesaw here. It looks like it'd be perfect for some landscaping type place there where you have several pickups, and you just pile a bunch of mulch out to the side and have office space. I would think somebody like that would gobble that location up in a hurry. So I think there's plenty of potential buyers for that one.
And again, that's what that appraised value, that 665,000 accounts for, is those existing structures, those existing improvements on that site. If you begin to try and remove those, you may get less money for the site. Then again, it all depends upon the buyer.
I think the example there would be if you're going to redevelop the shopping center and that's adjacent to it, the land's probably more valuable in that case than any of the buildings would be for reuse.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions?
Yeah.
I'll keep
Thanks,
going. We
Rob.
got like 200 more slides here, so
No,
I want to get you out here before
Sure,
midnight.
we can keep
Glad
going.
we started at 5:30. Okay, Patrick? Mayor and Commissioners, good evening. Patrick Schaub with BBN Architects. We've been hearing a lot about all the things that are wrong with the facilities. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about what we're proposing to take care of some of those, and the guys have been ribbing me because I ended up with the most slides in the presentation, but I guarantee that a few of them are very quick, so I won't have any undue delay. If you remember back in 2016, we went through a process of doing a feasibility study and analysis of the existing sites. That feasibility study included the appraisals of the existing property, evaluations of all the facilities involved with public works and their viability to continue use and efficiency. We looked at the locations in the town where they are. We looked at civil issues, and we worked with a company called Effective Management Decisions, a fellow named Roger Thompson, who is an expert in facilities planning for municipalities. And we came up with a report and about several dozen recommendations on things that should be improved to make the city's operations move better. Those recommendations included everything from administrative things to operations, a lot of things involving safety, personnel, number of personnel, and space needs. And so from that point, we went on and developed a what we call a program, which is a summary of spaces and the types of spaces that we would need to effectively address the concerns that were put forth in the feasibility analysis. We also developed a preliminary budget at that time based on the findings and the recommendations in that report. If you remember, we ended up with a facility that was somewhere around $23 million. Very large facility, probably more than it was determined the city was willing or able to take on at that time as far as improvements. We actually did a test fit on a hypothetical site out off of Zendale Road and determined that we would really require about a 95,000 square foot building on a large piece of property to address everything that was needed in the study. From that time, since then, what we have done is gone back to the drawing board and tried to do a facility which meets the immediate needs of public works, as well as some modest growth, and tried to get that project to a more reasonable size. Based on the recommendations for phase one, this is a comparative slide. You can see that the total building square footage that was recommended in that original report was about 97,000 square feet. The current plan I'm going to show you now has a base footprint of about 57,000 square feet with some possible and recommended additions of some storage space to go to 70,000 square feet. You can see the comparison, the reduction in the vehicle storage space from 49,000 to 38,000. We reduced the amount of space for the fleet maintenance storage from 28,000 to 22,000, and we basically cut the office square footage in half. We were at a $25 million total project cost at that point, and what we're proposing now is $17.5 million, and there'll be more discussion about how those numbers come together. This is a representation of some of the cuts that were made to the building to get to where we are, to be able to get down closer to that target number that we were trying to hit. You can see that the building size overall, if we consider the recommended storage space, lost 28% of its size, vehicle maintenance area 40%, and so on. Big hits were in indoor vehicle storage and the amount of office space for personnel in order to get back down to what would address the immediate needs with some modest growth for the facilities. So I'm going to show you an overview of the plan, slides of the specific building, the plan details, just to talk through that, and some examples of some of the areas on the site. This is awfully small and hard to see, but I wanted to kind of show an overall view of the site. This is the site that's out near the existing wastewater treatment plant. On the site, you come into the site from the north. This is a existing Westar layoff yard over here along Levy Drive, and we're proposing the facility go here, which is currently farmland, but purchased by the city. The building takes on a U shape here. We'll talk about the city recently purchased and is installing some modular office buildings out on this site right here. And as we talked about, flow through the site is of critical importance in one of these facilities because of the large vehicle movements we have. So this one is designed that incoming service vehicles would come in from the north, enter this north drive. The refueling station is over here to the extreme north, so at return at the end of the day, you can refuel your vehicle before proceeding around and parking it in the vehicle storage bays, which are at this end. If you're there for maintenance, you continue around, and this end of the building will be vehicle maintenance, and I'll show you those in more detail in a little bit. The rest of the site is consumed in various outdoor vehicle storage spaces, storage for spreader racks, trailers. We have some covered implement storage and covered material storage along the east property line. There are material storage bunkers for things like mulch and gravel and sand here as well. A large salt dome out here that we'll talk a little bit more about. And then we've got a separate and gated outdoor storage, central storage facility. One of the things that was really stressed in the original study was that we try to centralize material and parts and supply storage in the building with a central supply area, which I'll talk about, and also an outdoor central supply area so that you could have someone overseeing that inventory and things don't walk off or get lost. It's all contained and gated with controlled access to the materials that are stored on site. A couple of the sites pointed out that there is a real problem right now with the amount of employee parking and access to it. The way it works in this particular facility, once all the service vehicles will complete this loop of being stored or serviced, and then out this drive and back out Levy Drive to serve the city. If you're there as an employee, your drive is separate at the entrance. You're never crossing the traffic within the site with those maintenance vehicles, and you proceed into the parking lot and then into a controlled access employee parking lot. At this point, it's gated, so you're secure during the day, or if you have to leave your car overnight for a snow removal event, the employee parking is all controlled. If you're there for a visit or a meeting, you're in that same drive, but you've got a separate visitor parking lot. So you're not crossing traffic with the maintenance vehicles, the public vehicles, or the city staff vehicles at that point. So the building that I talked about, the U-shaped plan, this is the one that has about a 57,000 square foot footprint, and it's subdivided such that we have a front entry here, and the area in yellow is the office area. This is where the supervisors will have their offices, the public works folks will have their offices. They're in private offices sort of around the perimeter. We've got several small meeting rooms, conference rooms for them to share in this facility. The open office area is for crew heads, so that they'll have an open office position where they can sit and have access to a computer and a desk. We've got a training room and / break room at this position where the staff can gather. They can have break room for lunch or meal, or they can meet en masse. So this will hold about 75 people comfortably in that room, so they can meet as a staff. Also in that room, we've got what's called the computer touchdown area. There'll be 15 computer stations. So as was mentioned before, for instance, down at El Paso, they've got 2 computers for 25 people to access to do timesheets or keep up with their personal city business. Here we'll have 15 computers for the staff available for them. At the north end of that plan, this area up here is a central storage area with a delivery door at this position, so that you can bring things in and out here, and that would be the place with a parts counter that additional spare parts for vehicles, machinery, supplies, and that can all be handled through a central storage facility there. The blue area to the north would be the shop area, the fleet maintenance area, and I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail as we go on. Down here to the south, then we have the crew shops area, as well as a staff locker room facility, and then the indoor central storage, or vehicle storage, pardon me, in this position. Immediately outside this building, we have an area here which is surface parking for our vehicles primarily that are being staged to go in for maintenance, or additional outdoor surface parking for vehicles. Down here at the end of this wing, we have 2 outdoors, what we call hard stands. They're really outdoor wash bays, so that you can knock off the large dirt and things before you would bring the vehicle inside or put it through the interior wash bay, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And then this area, as you extend off and goes off the plan here, is one of the covered storage areas outside. They're open on the sides and unheated, but they do provide some protection from snow accumulation and from sunlight. The UV, of course, is hard on those hydraulic lines and stuff, so some covered parking for sensitive vehicles is pretty critical. This is the vehicle maintenance bay then to the north of the plan. We have pull-through bays in this situation, so you're not having to back vehicles at all times out, especially the large vehicles in and out of the maintenance bays. We have room to work on up to 10 vehicles at a time, possibly 11 if there's a small vehicle here. There are 2 vehicle lifts planned for the space, so you can get them up in the air. It was mentioned in the photographs of the existing fleet shop that the oil drums have to be stored out on the floor. We now have an oil room, centralized oil room, so all those fluids would be piped to the various stations, and they would use hoses to fill rather than having to work around those things. We have a large tool storage room, a large small engine shop that's separate from the main floor there, and we have the welding shop down here on the end with tire mounting and things at one end of the facility. There's also a small locker room for the mechanics in this area, restrooms in this area as well, and a locksmith shop in this area. Another important feature about this is we've got very high bays. We've got 16-foot tall doors on the large equipment service bays, and we've got a bridge crane that runs the entire length of the space. Right now, there are times where hoisting is a real problem, and we've actually heard stories of people trying to hold up the bed of a dump truck with a backhoe while they're servicing the hydraulics underneath it, which is just unfathomable from, you think about it from a safety standpoint, but we certainly have a high capacity hoist then available to all the maintenance bays, so that if large pieces need to be pulled or supported on the vehicles, they can certainly do so. I already kind of ran through what's going on in the main office area. So the entrance is here, reception is immediate. We've got a workroom here, the meeting room's off of that area, and then the crew areas and staff areas located in the center. This is the shop area. So each of the different divisions, street shop, the forestry shop, horticulture shop, would have a separate bay, which is where they could have their morning meeting space and also store some of their tools and have a workbench and things like that, so they could get their daily tasks done in that area. They all have access to the outside, so if someone's working on a weed eater and needs to start it up, they can step outside immediately and do that without having the fumes inside the shop. We did move the carpentry shop down to this position. We've got a chemical storage facility for pesticides, insecticides, herbicides in that area. And we've got locker room and personal locker storage for the staff located in this position. You'll notice at the center here, we've shown a stair. And one of the things that we're talking about proposing for this plan is that there be a second floor above this shop area, a storage mezzanine for additional storage for those things that only are used seasonally or such. There'd be similar storage areas above a portion of the vehicle maintenance bays and above the central storage area to get us to that 70,000 square feet. They're all not intended to be permanently occupied, but typically just used for storage. And then this is the fleet storage facility. These are for vehicles to be stored that either have sensitive parts on them or that are involved in snow removal detail, or that normally store water. So the street sweepers, the Vector trucks and things which are susceptible to freezing would be stored indoors, and then any vehicles used in snow removal operations would have a spot inside, as well as the small vehicles like gators and small steamrollers, pavement rollers, and things like that can be stored inside as well. These are designed with the larger of the 2 bays as a pull-through bay with angled parking, and then for the very largest vehicles, we have a separate high bay vehicle storage. We also have an indoor wash bay right here so that the vehicles can be maintained and the salt can be removed and the vehicles can be washed regularly. This is sort of a bird's eye view of the site. Again, as I talked about, that circulation would come for the city vehicles, would come through this way, refuel, loop around and be stored inside or arrive for maintenance. We have surface parking for vehicles in a large portion of the site. We have covered parking in 2 locations. These are spreader racks for the salt spreaders when they're not being used on the vehicles, and then those various storage components and the salt dome here, and then the outdoor central storage position. One of the things with facilities of this size and the size of vehicles that are being maintained is that the turning radiuses of these vehicles are great big, so maneuvering becomes a real issue. Well, we've designed this particular facility so that a semi with a 53-foot trailer can maneuver anywhere and get access to any of those, which is overkill for most of this. The only time we'll probably ever have that is for material delivery or to service the fuel island, but that'll make sure that we have ample maneuvering capabilities for the largest vehicles in the fleet.
Where are the mechanic bays that they'll be pulling the fire trucks into on the occasion they need?
They're up here, this wing, so they would come in, circle around and pull into these
So they can
bays. Yes,
drive through it and
they can
not-
drive through that,
Okay,
right.
thanks.
Yeah, there are doors on
Just
both
wanted-
sides of that wing.
I just couldn't figure out which building it was in. Thank you.
I finally wanted to show you an image of this sort of salt dome structure that we're proposing. This is it. It's got concrete sidewalls or bunker block sidewalls, and then a stretched vinyl canvas cover. There's an area to store a loader for the salt loader there, and then outside storage tanks for brine or calcium chloride. We're also talking about a brine mixer so that fluid brine could be mixed right there just by loading this salt into it, mixing it with water, and having it prepared for the trucks. This particular dome is very similar to the one that's at the headquarters fire station now, except this one is quite a bit larger and can hold a higher capacity of salt. Finally, what we've talked about is how much of this site can we afford to get paved. It's a huge expense out there. Site costs are one that's high on a facility this size. This is a diagram right now that shows what's included in the price that we have, and that is that the areas in the dark sort of lavender purple color are those which would be hard paved with concrete on the site. So that would be the fuel island, the high-use access drives, an apron outside of the buildings which will have the greatest turning radiuses of vehicles in and out. We're going to pave this center area that has a lot of turning maneuvers because it would be subject to puddles and pitting and stuff like that, rutting. We would pave the areas under the material storage so you don't have any loss of that, or so that when someone's scooping up a load of sand, they're not scooping up a load of our site with it to take out of the site, and then the area of the salt dome also. The rest of this would all be heavy-duty gravel surfacing right now. So we talked about the fact that because we were doing a facility or proposing a facility that doesn't have all the original growth planned into it, as was originally determined to be needed, what would we do for growth? And what we've identified is that for indoor, for fleet and maintenance storage or maintenance operations, this building is designed to be extruded to the west. So it's all designed as a pre-engineered building, and we designed this end wall to be added onto so that you could enclose more space there. Likewise, this covered vehicle storage could actually be a location for future indoor vehicle storage, be it low-conditioned, heated-only space, but fairly economical to do. And then there is space to expand the office areas either to the east or to the north if that becomes necessary. Are there questions before? Mayor, Commissioners, questions for Patrick?
Thanks, Patrick. Other questions for Patrick?
I think I heard
Not right
previously,
now.
take a look again at the facility out at 3131 Anderson. I did pull up, Commissioner Morris, I did pull up, so the final change order for 3131 Anderson, for that building that you all were discussing, final change order was in 2016. Final payment to Schultz Construction was $275,980 $12. The building is roughly 133 feet in length and 30 feet in depth, just under 4,000 square feet. That comes to about, right around $70 per square foot. Again, that's in 2016 dollars. Okay? Right.
Thank you, Rob.
No, you're welcome. Okay, kind of jump into some other tasks that we need to accomplish, or I would like some feedback. One of the items that we need to move forward, should the commission concur with the design and scope of the project this evening, we've already sent out letters for I went one too many, sorry. We've already sent out letters for a neighborhood meeting, part of annexation and zoning. You have to send out letters to property owners within 1,000 feet of your parcel. We have done that. We have scheduled a neighborhood meeting, virtual meeting for December 16th. We've also provided in the letter an opportunity if folks want to get a hold of us, via phone or letter or email. they can do so as well. We have to do the neighborhood meeting prior to application to community development. And we are proposing, just like the levee and the wastewater treatment plants, that we annex and zone it, as we did a few years ago, to I-3. Assuming the planning board and the city commission meetings continue to function as planned during the pandemic, the scheduled meeting dates, this property could complete the process of annexation and zoning by March of 2021. This allows, the reason why we want to do this allows the design team, the contractor, to submit final plans to the Manhattan Fire Department risk. I really don't want to send plans up to Westmoreland because this is in Potawatomi County and it's not zone or annex in the city. This also allows for emergency responses of services from RCPD for instances that could occur at this location. Unfortunately, we do have some history at the wastewater treatment plant, an unfortunate incident where response was an issue from the Potawatomi County Sheriff. It would be consistent with other facilities in this area for emergency response and also be subject to regulations and rules of other similar things as well. Okay, so the RFP. So I kind of focus on Juliet, but we can certainly have the discussion about all three properties. And the disposal of assets. In the past, we've discussed selling the two properties at 620 and 621 Juliet, as well as 3131 Anderson, once the project is completed and the crews have a new home to move to. So I don't want to sell these and drive the timeline nor drive up the cost of construction of the facility by advertising too soon, but I do think we need to have a discussion tonight, and I do need some direction. I have prepared an RFP that is similar to past RFPs that provided a format and a process which had allowed more control and have selection criteria for a proposal. Now, after speaking with the city manager's office, so some examples might be the South End redevelopment, where we did an RFP and we kind of controlled what the land use was. We ended up going with more hotels, things. I think even the community house had selection criteria. Y'all had more input into that selection process. After speaking to the city manager's office, do we want to perhaps change that direction, or does the commission really want that much direction or that much input into the selection process? Another option would be that rather we sell the property as is to the highest bidder with the understanding that zoning is what it is. So in this particular example, 620 and 621, the acreage is what it is. What is in terms of rights of way, the alleys, easements, and the existing zoning, that purchaser, if they want to change that, they have to go through the process. They have to submit. We're not guaranteeing that we're going to approve some new zoning, and that they just have to follow the rules and regs. It would also allow a purchaser, if they prepared a set of plans, they submitted those set of plans for a building permit, and as long as they conform to the land use of the existing zoning, they could receive a building permit and move forward with construction. So just help you understand the two, I guess, different options. Either do you want more control, or are you looking more for, to, I guess, sell it to highest bidder type situation? These three locations, street, fleet, and water and wastewater, we've talked about in the past of trying to return these to the private market and the tax rolls. El Paso property is the only property that we are recommending keeping for operations for the Parks Division. This property also has the least value of the appraised completed in the past. It has the least visibility from a major roadway, and its access to a major roadway is limited. Basically, the marketability of this property would be difficult, and retaining the property would be in the best interest of the city to hold onto the property for operations and staging equipment. I think you heard Casey and Eddie kind of speak to that. To summarize, the site location at 620 and 621 is not within any special identified district for redevelopment, to my knowledge, or any long-range plan beyond our current comprehensive published plans or otherwise. It would seem out of character to place demands on the buyer other than existing rules and regulations. So I guess that's my pitch. 620 and 621 has also been the one property I've had the most interest in a buyer in purchasing. So again, I'll take some input here at the end. Let me try and wrap this up. Next topic, US 24 and Levy Drive improvements. As it pertains to the intersection improvements at US 24 and Levy Drive, Public Works staff has used the engineer on-call system. We've engaged with Schwab and Eaton of Manhattan, Kansas to begin a traffic impact study. And our intent is to submit to the Kansas Department of Transportation, KDOT, to seek corridor management funding for improvements to the intersection. In fact, we've already received that draft traffic impact study, or that TIS. And it appears at first glance that even with reduced traffic volumes on our roadways with the pandemic, the hybrid school schedule, that without the addition of the joint maintenance facility traffic volumes, in other words, they weren't counted, they don't exist today, the intersection meets two of the warrant analysis to consider the installation of a traffic signal at the intersection today. So there's already some indication that we probably ought to take a look at that. Once the traffic impact study is completed, Public Works Department will request funding from KDOT at an 80-20 split, 80 state, 20 at the city, a split to install traffic signals, improve turning lanes at the intersections. We still need to agree upon those improvements with KDOT. There were some improvements that were originally identified in the US 24 corridor study that was done, I think it was like 12 or 13 years ago now. Until a scope of improvements is agreed upon, all parties, we won't begin design. Once we have those agreed upon scope, we can at least get started on some cost estimates. We can bring those updates back to you. And you know, with a KDOT project, there's city-state agreement. There's a number of different steps in which I have to bring that back to you all for concurrence. So I'm not looking for tonight just to charge off, go ahead and do X amount of project. I'm just trying to give you an update that there are a number of things that we are moving forward with this intersection, and just help you understand that there are some issues there even today. Probable timeline, depending upon input tonight. Obviously, there's a number of different things that are all in motion. I mentioned we're at schematic design. I'd like to get to a guaranteed maximum price document in March, and your input tonight on scope will kind of drive that timeline a little bit. Even if we begin construction in April of 2021, and this isn't a typo, August of 2022, this is probably the soonest that crews can move in. That's a 15 to 18th month timeline for construction. It's kind of what McCall Gordon has told us for the size and the scope of this project. Obviously, the KDOT, I don't have a lot of dates in here about the KDOT intersection improvement. A lot of that timeline could be driven more when funding is available. To my knowledge, corridor management funding, it's actually a fund I actually used to manage when I worked for KDOT. It is funded from state sales tax. As long as the legislators continue to feed the IKE program, those dollars should be available and us to compete to secure them. One thing that really helps us out is that we have a memorandum of understanding with the state of Kansas for the US 24 corridor. It kind of gives us a leg up for securing funding. And we've secured a number of projects over the years. All right, this last slide, almost last slide. In looking at big round numbers for the project, I want to point kind of the breakdowns of various components of the project. The main facility that Patrick talked about, area A, B, and C, which is the vehicle storage and shops, office and admin, and then the vehicle maintenance. Everything that's undercover, heating, cooling, offices, so on and so forth, is roughly around 7.9. We also have our site work that is in the middle here, which is around 5.2. 5.2. And then we have the exterior buildings. So you heard Patrick talking about the fuel islands, the covered vehicle storage, the north and south, the bulk storage, so on and so forth. The site work, we believe, those numbers can come down. So this 5.2 million, we believe we can continue to work with McCall Gordon. There's already some indications on the earthwork quantities that we can further reduce those, and some of the preliminary work by the design team. We are also evaluating lighting and the paving plan, which Patrick showed to you earlier, as in the previous slides. And a good majority of the site is already gravel. And we've really tried to reduce how much is hard paved, whether it's even heavy concrete being 8-inch thick or lightweight concrete or thickness of being 6-inch. What the slide doesn't include, so you notice you're at 14.6. What the slide doesn't include is bonding fees, FF&E, purchase of land, original feasibility study, design fees, etc., or the credits from the potential sale of the land from the 3 other properties. Right now, our total estimated max budget, or master budget, however you want to phrase it, is at 17.5. My point is, there isn't $3 or $4 million in cuts into this building without getting into significant program cuts. Somebody's not going to move out there. Do I think I can drive down and we can find savings with our partners? Absolutely. I think we can find savings. We could maybe even get down to 16.5 or 16.1. But what I'm telling you, getting 3 or 4 million out of this budget would be very difficult, and it most likely would be program cuts. Somebody's not going to move out there. We're going to cut off something major. Okay?
While you're on that one, Rob.
Go ahead.
So how much, are we gonna have to like build up the whole site 4, 6, 8 feet or something? Because I'd heard something about that at one point that.
Sure.
And.
No, that's an excellent question. So we did a drainage study out there. We've also been working with the Corps of Engineers. On the earthwork, I prepared a memo and I gave guidance specifically in some areas in terms of making sure that the main facility meets our floodplain regulations. We will meet the finished floor elevation in compliance with those floodplain regulations. So yes, there are some areas of the main building that will be in that 4 to 6 feet in terms of elevation. But after that, the only other thing that I talked about was a salt dome in that memo, was a salt dome as well as the fuel islands. But after that, we can taper the various areas downward so that we can reduce the amount of fill that we need and begin shaving off those quantities and that fill amount, if that makes sense to you.
It does. And so Mike, I guess we're not with the levee improvements. Is there any levee improvements happening on the south end there of that property?
Yep, there are, actually this is pretty good right here. So as part of the McCall Road drainage system, all of stormwater from McCall Road all ends up right here, okay?
Coming from the west or from the north?
It actually comes down this channel. Actually, it's worse today because it actually comes to here. It pretends to go underneath some corrugated metal pipes. It goes to the east, floods out in the field by Westar, kind of goes around the wastewater treatment plant, and there's a outlet on the east side of the wastewater treatment plant. It's a terrible slope. It's flat. It's not continuous grading. As a part of the project for the joint maintenance, there will be a channel here, and then part of the betterments for the levee, there's a new penetration that goes through the levee that'll be constructed under their project, and that is part of the overall levee design.
Is that a covered channel or is it an open channel?
If I remember right, I believe this was open channel. I can't remember. Yeah, what's that? It's open channel. Yeah,
So-
open channel, Commissioner.
So it would have the potential of, I guess my question is, would it have the potential of flooding outside of those banks like everything does? My question is, it might flood farther up at some other bottleneck before it.
Right.
that-
So whether that channel is covered or open, it still has the same, there's a certain amount of capacity with both.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's covered, you actually might have less capacity and you might have less storage versus, open would have more in terms of capacity and storage as well.
So the concern for building it up is, it's not the Kansas River flooding, because the levee is supposed to protect us from that. It would generally be the standing rainwater accumulating and/or this kind of influx of rainwater from the
Yep, there's
drainage.
probably two good different scenarios we would be worried about. Either a high river condition on the Kansas, rain falls inside the bathtub, how do we get the water out of the bathtub? And how much rain fell inside the bathtub? The other scenario is Kansas River is fine, the Kansas River is down, but we have a significant event inside the bathtub, lots of rain, intense rainfall, but the overall regional system. And we've looked at, our consultants have looked at those different scenarios, trying to find the right balance point so that we pick an elevation that protects the main facility, but yet we're not being exorbitant.
Yeah, because that's a large area to build up 4 to 6 feet, and so I was hoping that the whole thing wasn't gonna have to be elevated that way.
No, and I gladly share the memo that I wrote to the design team, based off that drainage study, what the Corps of Engineers, I had Brian Johnson, the city engineer, as well as Bill Heatherman, review that memo as well. So to provide guidance and make sure we're finding that right balance between meeting our floodplain regulations, protecting the main building, but yet not getting carried away.
Rod, this is Aaron. I just want to clarify the earthwork while you're talking about that channel, or that culvert that's kind of needs to be addressed. That's part of this earthwork, this 1.9, or is that in addition?
No, I would believe, it's most likely in that, I don't know if it's in that 1.9, it might be in part of that site improvements, the 2.4. I'd have to get McCalgord and get into the spreadsheets, but it's included in the overall 14.6. If that makes sense. Did I say that all right? Very good.
So Rob, a follow-up to
Sure.
Mark, Commissioner Hattasall's question. There's this sentence that says, reduced finished floor elevation of the main building and site to reduce the amount of fill required, and that was one of the cost-saving measures.
Yep.
So you're building it up, Mark said 6 to 7 feet, so so now it's only gonna be 5, or what is tell us what you're...
So
that
that's, that sentence that you're reading,
Right.
that's what I'm talking, that's the explanation I just
For
gave the
Mark's
Commissioner
question.
Hattasall.
Okay.
And I believe we can drive down some of that earthwork of that 1.9. Does that make sense, Commissioner?
Money-wise, I was just asking for a practical, how much you're sacrificing from the height, because this is a low area and it doesn't drain well. And I know in the flood of '93, you were very apprehensive about the wastewater treatment plant, and so I want to, is this higher, this area a little bit higher than the wastewater treatment plant land? No?
No.
Okay.
The wastewater treatment plant, portions of it are equal or greater than the levee.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay,
no,
so
I'm
we've
not,
built
I'm
it
not.
up. Yeah, we've built it up. I just want to be sure that we're not compromising something we may have to pay for later. So you're basically reassuring me. I appreciate that.
I've spent, I appreciate the questions, Commissioners, because, again, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
In trying to provide protection, meet our floodplain regulations. Again,
Exactly.
that's another reason why I want to annex and zone. I want to force ourselves to follow our own rules. And if it wasn't for the improvements, the betterment to address the McCall, and again, the 1995 Stormwater Management Master Plan had identified an improvement project for this drainage system long before we ever talked about the joint maintenance or even the improvements to McCall Road. In 1995, before the whole redevelopment, widening McCall from that wonderful urban 2-lane, 3-lane, no curb and gutter, no storm sewer, open ditch, to what we have now, which is obviously a commercial hub generating lots of sales tax and property tax for us all.
Sure.
It was identified in 1995 that there was a problem out here. And working with the Corps and trying to balance all that, that's that's what we're doing here.
I understand.
This is City Manager Fear. I'd just like to clarify the comment about the 93 flood. The wastewater treatment plant was never in jeopardy of being flooded in 93. In fact, the only thing really out in that valley that had a threat to it was the West Star substation, which is low, like this area is that we're proposing. And we had about a 3-foot sandbag wall that was constructed around it, which was enough to protect it. So again, we had a 5.5-inch rain while the rivers were full. So there wasn't a lot of place for that to go. And so that had to spread out there. But the plant itself was never in jeopardy and wouldn't have been except if we'd had a levee breach or
Levee
something like
failure.
that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll try and wrap up the last slide. The master budget or total budget I talked about, 17.5. That 17.5 includes, Commissioner Ashbrook, you were asking, that includes the 14.6, that includes the original feasibility study, design fees, bonding fees, so on and so forth. We know, and I talked already earlier about, we do believe we can come down a little bit from that 17.5. Again, whether we land at 16.2, 16.1, or 16.5, that's refining those numbers, working the various sources that McCall Gordon has with vendors and suppliers, whether it's the fuel station or the T-beam structure, steel prices, and so forth. But what I don't have is I don't have $4 or $3 million without making major program cuts. And that's kind of my point tonight, and that's the feedback I need. Office space has been reduced to current staffing levels. You heard Patrick. We're only allowing for minimum growth of new employees within each division. Because of this reduction in future, likely additions will be needed to the facility in the future, 10 to 20 years. Will be necessary to support the growth of the community depending on how much we continue to grow and expand as a population. Not to mention, Casey talked about new facilities and expectations from the community on how to provide for that. In the memo, I did provide 8 different things that we believe we can use to reduce our prices for the project. Some of them include on Levee Drive. Originally, we looked at possibly widening Levee Drive through the project location. We've kind of reduced that to just improving the entrances in terms of tapers, making sure that the turn radiuses are appropriate for off-tracking and trailers and so forth. We've eliminated the loading dock. We've altered the design of the salt dome from a wooden structure to the picture that Patrick showed. So it's more similar to what we have out at the fire station today. I will tell you the size. We did kind of account a number of years. Ron has told me that K-State Foundation was interested in purchasing the headquarters fire station, and we would lose the salt dome there for redevelopment. So that's certainly something we've tried to account in terms of tonnage and space that we need there, but yet tried to look at some alternatives versus a wooden structure. We also changed the design of the implement covered storage, which are these 2 items over here, from T-structures to more simpler concrete bunker blocks with arc canvas. We've eliminated some minor architectural features which were in the front reception area. Basically, the entire facade of the building now will be the same skin and the same finished material. We eliminated the canopy out at the fuel island. So just like you all go to the gas station, you have a canopy. We've eliminated that. And we've already kind of talked about reduction in paving surfaces, and the majority of the site is gravel.
Do you have a canopy over the fuel island currently? The
No, we do
old
not.
one? You do not?
No.
So it won't be, okay.
Frankly, if when you begin to get into wants and needs, my biggest issue at the fuel station today is the turning radiuses, the proximity to personal vehicles, the ability to fuel it up safely when the semi comes in with the fuel. Those are true needs. Yes, it would be nice to have a canopy over it. Does Riley County Public Works have it? Yeah, sure they do, but I need to fix some very systemic functional issues, and I would much rather have that, and we'll sacrifice the canopy. So I don't want you all to think that we're trying to get best value here. That's really what we're trying to do, and so forth. So with that, commissioners, we've spoke a lot tonight. Certainly would take questions. Certainly looking for direction, definitely on the RFP for the sale. Hopefully the annexation and zoning, no one has any issues. Maybe that's an easy one to knock out. But with that, Mayor, Commissioners, I'll stand for questions.
Thanks, Rob. A long presentation, but there was a lot of material to cover. So I just wanted to say I do appreciate your staff giving me the time to tour the facilities, the maintenance and the fleet, and all of the issues that you're having right now and the challenges you're facing. It is a very constrained space, and we've been talking about this for a few years now, and it kind of reminds me when Parks and Rec was in that mobile unit for decades, and then we finally moved to a different space. And we're talking about infrastructure that was built in 1940s and 1995, and whatever we invest right now will last another 50 to 60 to 70 years. And it's also apparent that the not only the equipment, but the vehicles are being built larger, as was mentioned, and you don't have control over that, but our buildings are not fit for them either. So I think a lot of discussion to have, a big price tag, and I'll open it up for commissioner questions and suggestions and feedback for you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone can start?
You know, just, having looked at the facilities a couple of years ago and walked through there, they're totally inadequate, and so it's necessary to proceed with this. I think you've got a good budget there. What I would recommend is we sell all three of those properties. And you know, based on the numbers, you might end up with 1.6 million, maybe a little bit more, depending upon, you know, what's out there. And then take that amount and use it to offset those water department costs, because we got $1 zillion worth of other projects we need to fund. So if we could limit, you know, the amount of money that has to come out of stormwater and wastewater by offsetting it by this 1.6 million in real estate sales, I think that would be a good route to follow. And then I'd also would like us to take a look at, you know, we've got the economic development tax that passed, 70% for infrastructure. We didn't build any of that into here. And I'm not saying you could offset all of it, but with some of the savings, you get it down to 16 million. Maybe we could use a portion of that to offset this annual debt payment, because that was the intent of that, was to drive down the city debt. But, and you've left room for growth. I can see, you know, in future years, you may have to expand this thing out some, and the plan seems to have built that in so that it's gonna be easy to grow without having to go someplace else. Then the final thing is, I'm not interested in having any control on the sale of those. You know, the RFP, just sell it as is, and the developer can, you know, fight the system to put whatever he wants there. And they need to be aware of what the current zoning is and things of that nature. And I think that's adequate.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Morris?
I do support that you proceed, of course, support moving on for annexation and zoning. I think that's the way we protect the city and the property that we're discussing. And if we haven't done that with the current facilities, I don't know, sometimes we have a park that's not even annexed yet. I don't even know if the city, if your facilities are annexed and zoned, but I do think that when we sell a property, it is a fit, it's in an industrial area or not commercial. I mean, I think it needs to be sold. I want to get the full price out of it. I know that when the city has sold we bought those lots, we envisioned being able to cover our costs. We couldn't even do that. I want to be sure that we and I don't care if it takes a year or two. Give it to a real estate agent and let them sell it and get the right cost. Look how long that Standard Station has been sitting there at the corner of 4th and Fort Riley Boulevard a couple of years, but it's finally selling, and they're probably going to get the amount of money they wanted. And I think it's important that we get, you know, that the city not sacrifice an amount. I think that I appreciate the cost-saving measures you've proposed. That's important. We all are watching our pennies and listening to the community, and they're concerned about the expenses. And so I also want the Parks and Recreation Department to function this next summer. And so, you know, there's this balancing act, so this has to be more, you know, can't be elaborate, and I appreciate your really kind of scaling it back. I think the scope of the project is correct. I want to be sure that we're not, I want to be sure that we build to allow some growth, and I heard you say that you're not allowing for much growth in employee, and you know, we're probably not into a lot of growth for employees. We're not seeing a lot of growth right now, and so that is an appropriate measure, it seems to me. Financing, there's only one way to do it, I think, and you've talked about that in these materials. Certainly, you have the sale of 620 and 621 Juliet, and they are, here we go, both of those, and I don't know, I just hate having put so much money into the waste, that Anderson property, but if you can get the full amount and recover the cost we invested in it, because it still looks new even. We put that building with those awnings, and I just, you know, hate to keep the old facility on El Paso and give away a newer looking one, but it won't hold the park department, I know. So I'll just go along with selling the 3 properties and retaining El Paso. I think that's about all you said. Have I covered everything?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, sure.
Commissioner Hattersley?
Yeah, Hattersley here. Yeah, I think we'll start at the bottom, and I think on the annex and zoning thing, yeah, I think the city needs to live with the same rules that apply to everybody else, and so we need to start that process and get that moving along. Yeah, I think the Anderson property, I think that thing will get gobbled up in a hurry, because like I said, landscape people, anybody that has trucks and needs outside storage and wants to be close to town, yeah, I wouldn't lowball that price. I would ask a lot for that. And I'm not sure if the city's proper, or if we have, I'm sure we have a disposal guidelines. I'm not sure if having a realtor is included in that, or if it's all RFPs and sealed bids and things that you can't always figure out how to get the highest bid and price out of something. But I think that one, I think there'll be a lot of demand for that one. The El Paso property is obviously crap. The location's terrible, the building's bad, everything's bad, and so though I don't think anybody's going to be interested in that anyway. So if it works great to keep our equipment stored there with low annual maintenance upkeep on it, I think that one will have very little interest on the market. 620 and 621. Yeah, we should try to sell those. They don't have frontage onto Fort Riley Boulevard unless you build a hotel, but it's next to a railroad tracks. It's got to only have interest as industrial type light, yeah, whatever it is currently zoned will probably be all that interested. I would assume Howie's is going to be the one interested in the one across the street behind the auto parts, the Orange Auto Parts store, whatever their name is. That one might have a little bit of visibility, and so that one, that'd be, which one's that? 20 and then 21?
Let's see, I think 21 would be, Jeff? 621 is Fleet, so Fleet's to the east.
East, so I think that one, I think that one's gonna be, I'm not sure which one was valued more, but I would think that's probably, might be the smaller one, but that one has a little bit more potential opportunity, I would hope there, so. Financing it, when you say, general fund for $450,000, that could be money from the or the half-cent sales tax pumped into the bond and interest fund. That doesn't automatically mean property taxes, right?
It doesn't, and you might recall, when we did the .3, we hadn't targeted a lot of the .3 for the
Yeah.
joint maintenance, but we had targeted some. So
yeah,
it
I
could-
would.
The
yeah, I
general
don't-
fund covers a lot of sources.
Right, and so I would think that if we do an annual transfer of $1 million for the bond and interest fund, or whatever it might be, as part of the debt reduction aspect of infrastructure stuff and debt reduction, that would easily take care of that without having to load that onto the property taxes. So financing, yeah, figure out, we'll probably end up doing some of the half-cent sales tax on that. Scope of the project, yeah, let's do this thing once, do it right, and be done with it. That's gonna replace what, the 6 or 7 buildings that the county, it's the equivalent of the 5 or 6 or 7 buildings the county has out there. Essentially, I know we don't have noxious weeds and a few of those other things, but that's where they do most of this kind of stuff, isn't it? And so if we can get by with, yeah, I'm sure that our cost is gonna be no less than what their cost was, if not more, because we've got all that dirt work to do that they wouldn't have had to do up on a hill. So that's my, I guess my big gripe with that piece of land is how much we're gonna have to pay to grade it and build it up and make it flood prone, unworthy, and so.
Not that I looked at the Riley County shops, but they have a total building square footage of 87,000 square feet. Their laydown area is almost 210,000 square feet. This orange area and this area, their total tract of land is 48.31 acres.
How many acres is ours?
36, I believe. I'd have to pull the exact numbers.
And you don't have any idea how much they spent on that up there?
That I don't
Yeah,
know. That was
so.
that was more difficult.
Probably, yeah, 20 million in 2021 dollars, so. So, yeah, just, we need to move forward with it, because, yeah, I did the tour a year ago, and yeah, those buildings are ill-equipped for having people actually work out of them, so let's move on.
Thank you. Commissioner.
All right, I was checking off everything everybody's already said, so I don't have to repeat, because I'm in agreement with pretty much all the comments. I just wanted to also, I checked real quick, like Commissioner Hattasol, we both toured, I think, and about a year ago. It was December 13th, actually, last year, almost exactly a year ago. And I have pictures to see that maybe even show the crowding was even worse in some of my pictures than you had on the slideshows. So I got a good taste of it then, and understand that in a lot of respects, I came in thinking this was a priority. Then again, was able to see how it in some ways had been neglected as a investment from the city over a period of time. But on the flip side of that, I think there's an argument that the Public Works has been prudent and fiscally responsible, and kind of have stretched to the point of you can't stretch any farther. That dollar that's been given to you, that tax dollar through the department. Served on the selection committee, so kind of got a really good idea of what other things look like, and they look a lot different than what we currently have, and a lot better, and that feeds into, I think, how Jeff and Dan spoke and Eddie spoke earlier about the morale and the staff and the retention and the problems that we face, and it ties into what I understand in my role with vocational education and Job Corps, and the market and the need and the high demand for those trades, and it's hard to get them, and it's hard to get them to go work in that type of environment, especially. And we have two good institutions here in our community that we should be kids should be wanting to come and work in our facilities, but it's tough. So that I completely agree with. I think Public Works and serves over 350, pretty much touches every component of the city. So in that regard, as far as maintenance and PMCS, the safety, I'll try to pretend I didn't hear the OSHA violation you mentioned earlier, because it does come back to safety of people, and we're asking our fire trucks to be there to save the community. They also need to be maintained, and it starts right there at that PMCS level, so it's really important. It's hard, it's very hard to convince the community that that's a priority, but it absolutely is, and it's the backbone of, I think, what the city does. I think you've presented a very, reasonable plan, and for the last 60 years, it seems to be, you've stretched a lot of things. You've been fiscally responsible. You're not asking for extravagant things. You're asking for a consolidation and maybe more efficiencies in a lot of ways. So I agree with all of the annexation. Selling the 3 is fine. Your financing options, the scope, and the master budget. There's discussion there. I hope you can find some savings. I know there's been some numbers starting back at the 0.3 that it wasn't quite up to 17 and people in the public's mind. So we got to explain that a little better. And you did touch on the 3 million that's going in, that has been kind of packaged into design and fees and bonding, and that's all I got for you. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I hope the staff that are working in those conditions understand that we see and hear that.
Just one short story on the Quonset hut that Dan and Jeff talked about. A few years ago, I asked the guys to go power wash it. We went up to Riley County, and I don't know if you guys know this, they make paint. They mix up paint. And I told Jeff and said, go up there and get some Battleship Gray. We got to paint the building. It looks horrible. Right? And we got, some landlords that were chucking stones at us. How can you light your facility? And they were right. So we have, tried to stretch things as much as we can and do things. Eddie and Casey are no different at their facility. They've really tried to stretch. So I appreciate comments. Commissioner Hassel.
I don't remember us talking last week when we were setting the water, sewer, and wastewater rates. Were these numbers already plugged into those, so we're already accounting for that in the rate increases that they talked about last week, right?
Excellent question, and the answer is yes.
Okay, yes, okay, so.
Yep, that 289, I don't know, well, Randy ran away, but yes, that 279, those are already plugged in future payments of the water and wastewater, as well as the stormwater fund.
Okay, so just, so from the 17,586 to the 19,600, because I thought that 17 was supposed to include most of the bonding and land acquisition and design fees. Is the last 2.1 million increase from 17.5 to 19.6, is that?
Principal, I'll have to go double check and see if I pulled something wrong.
Did that, yeah.
There's some bonding. I know there's some bonding things. I use a spreadsheet from finance. I plug in 17.5 and then it calculates up all these numbers for me. So I will go back and double check
And just,
that.
it seems like $2 million for.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Short, and unless that includes temp note interest and stuff for
Yes.
2 to 5 years or whatever the magic number is, along with, 3 years of temp notes, and so.
Yep.
3%, that's, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have 3 years of temp notes. You got bonding fees, closing costs. Again, I wish finance was here, but I basically take their spreadsheet, I plug in what is my total project cost, 17.5, and then it kicked out all these numbers. I then worked percentages of each fund, and then did,
So
just did all the math.
it's probably mostly interested in, bond counsel fees and everything else, I suppose. Okay.
So Rob, you got a lot of feedback from everybody, mostly positive for everything you wanted and hopefully constructive. Like I said, I do appreciate taking a tour of the facilities. These are some of those, this is one of those, excuse me, projects that it's hard for the public to appreciate because They don't know how much work the street sweepers do, or the snow is plowed, or the potholes are filled, or you're even growing trees for times where we have to start planting trees on some of the other areas. And you have a gentleman there that's making parts for machines and vehicles that are outdated, and the parts are not available anymore. So I don't think people have that comprehensive picture of this large price tag to this. At the same time, if we wait and you do it eventually, because it will be there eventually, the cost will be almost twice as much if we don't do it right now. And I think this is the time to move forward with all the study, and I do appreciate the 8 areas that you did cut, and I do know how frugal you are and how much you think about not only the pennies but the care of your staff. And I think it speaks to our community to keep it well run. So I think you got all the feedback you needed. I agree with all the comments that were made as well, and hopefully we can get this up and going and slowly check off each one of those and see progress.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, thank you, Commissioners. I look forward to seeing you in March on this project, hopefully with a guaranteed maximum price contract with Melcall Gordon, and then hopefully we can begin construction in April. So,
Thank you.
thank you for your time. Sorry for the length, but felt it was important to kind of cover its, 2016 is a long history. So, and I do appreciate the tours that Paul made second previously, and pictures that you've taken. So, with that, I get the Windbag Award for tonight. Thank you.
No, you don't.
Did a good, thorough job. Thank you.
Rob,
Commissioner Morris?
I could tell nothing had changed from a couple of years ago, 2 years ago when I took my tour. That was my second
Just as,
tour.
so, yeah. So thank you.
Mayor, you might want to take a little break.
Okay, we'll take a break. It's about 7:20, maybe until about 7:30. We'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and sitting here with us all evening.
Mayor, would you push the podium mic? Would you push the podium mic just so that the folks aren't, or while we're breaking, just so folks don't.
Which one? You want the one that says podium mic? The other one doesn't need to be on. Right, because otherwise.
So now you can talk about how soon they're going to finish the technology in the room. Garrett? Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. No, I was just, somebody from the public texted me and said, I can't hear. And then it was, I can barely hear. And so I was thinking, isn't that about wrapped up yet? Thank you. Appreciate the update.
Yeah. Oh, it is? Should I just slide over? Oh, it's just my neck? So.
It's like right here.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
You were talking, and then I just, occasionally I look out there to see if everything's working.
I'm gonna look next time and be like, oh, well.
Don't worry about it.
For our 19 viewers at home. It's only 2 hours, right? This- They're already charging.
Okay, we are back. This is the continuation of our work session, December 8th, and our next agenda item this evening is the discussion on the strategic plan request for qualifications and proposals, selection, and recommendation. Jared Wassinger, our assistant to the city manager, will be presenting this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Tonight I'll be presenting on the strategic plan that we went through a request for qualifications and proposals process, and have a firm that we are recommending for selection to negotiate an agreement to begin services here at the beginning of January 2021. I'm going to kick off with a few slides just to give you all some context and the public some context. But then really this is an opportunity, the first opportunity for some of you to engage with the lead consultants with Planning Next. Jamie Green is the principal consultant, as well as Sarah Bongiorno, who's the project manager with Planning Next. Mayor Reddy and Commissioner Estabrook got the chance to meet them during the selection committee interviews, but they're going to go through their proposed scope of services tonight to give you an understanding of what's ahead. Like I said, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background, talk about the process and the selection and recommendation, as well as give you all a short preview of some next steps that you'll be considering. As a little background, you all are familiar with our Organization Excellence Initiative, OEI, which really came from conversations and focus groups with our 400 employees across the organization. There were some key areas that we wanted to focus on to better recruit and retain the quality people that we have here working for the city. Those things range from our budget process, performance evaluations, pay and benefits, work hours, and workplace environment. When we went through those processes and those 6 key areas I just mentioned, at the top of the list of 3 of those categories was a strategic plan for the city of Manhattan. That was with the budget process, so we could tie our budgeting process from an operational perspective as well as a capital improvement perspective to that strategic plan. Performance evaluations, the strategic plan came up. It's easier for organizations and more meaningful for the employee to tie their work performance, their duties, to that mission, to that vision, to those strategic objectives and performance measures that are listed in a strategic plan. And then workplace environment. The joint maintenance facility was a great kickoff for this because the physical environment that our employees work in has an effect on their job and their job satisfaction. I'm not going to get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but the next step with that comes that attachment to the organization, that the mission that you're working for, you know, being satisfied with your job and the work you're doing for your community. And having that strategic plan helps our employees in that sense as well. We went through quite a budgeting processes for 2021. We knew with the pandemic that we were going to be coming upon some significant budget shortfalls. And city administration took that proposal to you for the 2021 budget with some significant cuts in some significant areas that would have impacts to the community. We highlighted certain areas, and we knew that the across-the-board cut that we've been doing in recent years when we were seeing flat revenues wasn't a strategic approach. But without that strategic plan, management was really working with you all to try and make those decisions and those cuts in the most efficient and effective way as it related to the services we provide and our people. Through that, we knew, and we knew how other cities practiced, that having that strategic plan, having the community input and an understanding of the community's needs, desires, and priorities for city services is important and helps you make those decisions and narrow down those items as you need to be more fiscally conservative, and then plan for the future for the major initiatives that we want. So during the 2021 budgeting process, CIP was approved for $125,000 to hire a consultant and conduct a strategic planning process. And that would be funded out of the general fund. And then on October 6th, the City Commission authorized a request for qualifications and proposals. So we advertised that on October 7th to the standard areas that we do with Drexel, the Mercury, our website. As well, we posted it to the American Planning Association. And I think that was the reason why we got a whopping 13 proposals, which was really exciting to see all that interest in Manhattan and the strategic plan. It made it difficult to narrow it down. We had a selection committee, like I said, of the mayor and Commissioner Estabrook, as well as a representative from each of our departments. We narrowed it down to 4 firms, 4 interviews, and came upon Planning Next out of Columbus, Ohio, and their great experience and knowledge in the strategic planning process. I won't go into too much detail about them because they have some information that they want to share to you about themselves and their philosophies and their approaches. This was listed, in greater detail in the RFQ and RFP about the scope of services that the city was desiring out of this process. We're looking for that environmental scan. A lot of communities do that SWOT analysis up front with the consultant. A major public engagement plan. Public engagement is difficult, maybe during a pandemic, but we know, and the firms that we've talked to have actually had some success during the pandemic with virtual public engagement. That was one of the reasons that we were so inclined with Planning Nexus proposal, because they were actually in the middle of a few strategic plans in January and March of 2020 and made that pivot to a virtual engagement platform and have a lot of that experience. We're looking again for that long-term mission and vision, the long-term vision for the community, the mission for our organization as we approach our city services, and then core values as we implement those. Strategic objectives that we can look towards the annual budget, and then as we create our capital improvement program on an annual basis. Performance measures, like I was saying, so we can look at those strategic objectives and make sure we're on track, and then creating that implementation framework after the final plan is adopted. That's a really big thing that some cities, they adopt that long PDF document these days, and then it could sit on a shelf. But one thing we were really intrigued by with Planning Next is the implementation framework that they would set staff up to successfully implement that plan. Next steps, over the course of December. We're going to finalize that agreement and scope of services with Planning Next. The agreement and scope of services was in your packet. That was, the first draft that Planning Next has proposed. Our legal staff and city administration still need to look through that, but it's pretty consistent with the things that we were looking for out of the RFQ. So we're going to hope to have that for you for approval on January 5th, 2020, first meeting of the year. Another thing that Planning Next is going to get into a little bit more detail about, but I want you all to be aware that this is something that I will be working with Jamie and Sarah on as we move forward and really kick this off. Is one thing that they recommend is creating a project steering committee, if you will, made up of community members, made up of members of the community that are representative of our population and all the different people in our community. So they have some suggestions about how to do that. We're looking at a 6 to 8 month time frame, so it will help if we kind of start that legwork now over December to seek applications for that committee and create an approval process. They have Planning Next has some recommendations for you there, but we hope to get that in front of you on January 19th for approval. That committee is really going to be a sounding board for our consultants. They're going to meet about 5 times throughout the process to dive into some of those things. They're also there as the face to the community to let them know these are when the public engagement things are happening. This is how you can get involved. This is how you can provide feedback. So it's important that we have that as a representative group of our community. With that, I'm gonna stop my share and I'm gonna let Jamie and Sarah start. There they are, and commissioners, this is kind of what they see, so if you don't mind saying your name before you speak, they're on Zoom, so if you could speak up as well as you can, that'll help them hear a little bit better. They're gonna go ahead and start talking, and then if Jamie or Sarah, if I need to repeat anything, if you couldn't hear, you can let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jaron. You ready for us to pull up the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Sarah and I are really thrilled to be with you tonight and to be considered to help you with this really important project for the city. We have about 15 or 20 slides, a lot less than your last agenda item, but that was important work. So we're gonna go through these, and then I think the idea is that there's a Q&A that happens. So again, my name is Jamie Green, and my colleague Sarah Bongiorno is on here as well.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Are we good on the presentation?
We are. Do you want to click presentation mode? I think that should go full screen.
All right, I thought that's what we did, but I'm gonna take it out, stop the share. So let's hope there are no deducts for this. Is that the full screen, or?
Yes, that's great.
Great. All right. So here we go. I apologize for that. So I want you to know that you're going to hear the word planning a lot in the remarks that Sarah and I make, but we're more interested in what happens after the plan than the actual plan itself. We know that the only reason that you should be doing this is because you want to get some results. And a lot of the decisions we make about the process are geared specifically to try to help you get to the implementation phase successfully. So in this relatively short presentation, we're going to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, our background. We want to just reflect a little bit on the challenges that this kind of work entails. Sarah's going to talk about our approach, give you a high level description of what this 6 to 8 month looks like, and then just some reflections on the process before we talk about what we think you should do with the plan when you actually have it completed. So I think first and foremost, we want you to know that we really are focused on what you've asked for here in terms of the planning work. We're a relatively small group, 12 people, but this is what we do. In a minute, you'll see some examples of places where we've worked, but we've worked from Massachusetts to Hawaii, from California to Florida, and just right now working in 8 different states. And so we really are focused on helping make better communities. One of the reasons that we were attracted to you and this project is because of the kind of community you are, a university community. And, there are a few firms, and no firms, I'm willing to say, our size, that have worked in a wide array of university communities that we have. We're just finishing work in College Station, Texas, and we've been working for a couple of years and still working in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We've worked in places up in the Northeast, up in the upper Midwest, but we think we know something about these kind of dynamics, and we really love university communities. I also am proud to share this is what I call the vanity slide, and that is again, for a small group, we think we do some pretty quality work, and our clients typically, are satisfied and they want the recognitions and submit for, the awards. But this is an example of some of the places that we've been awarded. The right-hand column are the state chapters of the American Planning Association. The light blue stars are awards this year, and the one by Alabama, and I'm not sure why we've been so successful in Alabama, but we're happy about that. And tomorrow, Montgomery, Alabama is going to receive the top planning award in their community, the first plan that Montgomery has done at 56 years. So, the selection committee asked us to tell us a little about why we thought, we were relevant to what you're trying to do. I think that, we've been at this for, over 23 years. Not only the university committee experience, but, we've worked in some areas not far from you. Overland Park, we're really proud of the work that we did there with their vision and strategic plan. And Prairie Village is another client a number of years ago. And Mark has hired us on 3 separate occasions for facilitation engagement about creating quality places and creating sustainable places. And I think, the other part, and I know that the selection committee checked some of our references, but, we really are in this to be your shoulder-to-shoulder partner. It's not a turnkey process. It's really taking a good process framework and making it work for your community. And then, as I said earlier, this is really what we do. So even though we've done this, 23 plus years, and we've done it in some tough places, we're not naive enough to think that this is easy. It's not. And again, the committee was interested in what we thought some of the challenges might be here in Manhattan. And, one is that there isn't like the culture and the experience of doing this and doing this and doing this, working the plan. Some communities we go in, they've had 20 years worth of strategic planning tied to the budget, as Jared said, and it's really a different kind of environment. So it's all doable, but we all should recognize that this is not something that has been done, at least the way that you're envisioning. In an understatement, doing this work right now, it's a challenge just given the dynamic environment. And I don't mean just the pandemic. I'm talking about what's happening to things like retail in this country. And that was happening dramatically before the pandemic. So, you know, there's a lot for us to sort of have to navigate, but you know, we've worked in some very challenging places. We worked in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. We were the consultants that facilitated Imagine New York after 9/11. Very challenging time. So we're comfortable being able to do that, but it is a challenge. Engaging people, you know, I think, you know, I still get caught up in thinking like, gosh, you'd think people be enthused to talk about the future of their community, but the reality is it's not, and there's a lot of good reasons why people don't. And so that is a challenge, but we've got lots of tools and experiences to, you know, to do our best to make sure that engaging is a choice in Manhattan. I think the fifth point there is really about, you know, where's the sweet spot between things that we really need to do, want to do, versus the reality of resources, capacity to do it. And I think that's one of the challenges that we want to help you navigate is, you know, how do you find that particular sweet spot? And then, you know, it's not enough to have a good vision and strategic plan and performance measures. Somebody or somebodies, you know, need to own the implementation, to be accountable for what's going to happen. And that can be a challenge because you may have people that should own something that don't have the capacity or maybe don't have the interest. But that's really, you know, one of the challenges. But all of these are things that we can work through. I'm going to ask Sarah now just to walk you through, like, again, at a high level, what's in the detailed scope that sounds like you have from Jared.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Good evening, everyone. So I know you've got the detailed scope in the proposal, but I wanted to just show you this timeline that we mapped out the work. And we have it kind of organized into 3 buckets: preparation, the engagement, both internal within the city and with the public, and then developing the actual, you know, plan itself. So we've mapped this right now. I know Jared said sort of a 6 to 8 month process. We've got this mapped out over 8 months, which allows us a couple months, you know, for the preparation. We've got engagement happening, you know, throughout. But I want to call your attention to the star and the line there with the arrow at the end of June. You know, the goal is to have substantially complete the actual recommendations and the meat of the strategic plan so that it can be used for the budgeting cycle purposes. So what we would be doing after that end of June would be, you know, really packaging the plan, finalizing, thinking about some of the implementation pieces and kind of pulling it all together. But the substantial pieces of the work would be done in those first sort of 6 months. Jamie, you want to advance to the engagement slides. So now I'm going to zoom in here, focus in on the engagement piece itself, because there are a number of different components here. So, you know, per the RFP, we do have 2 formal touch points with you, the City Commission, at the beginning of the process and one towards the end, which, you know, we're kind of calling them retreats, a kickoff and a wrap up. But that by no means will be the only time we'll want to interface with you. You know, we'll want to do that give updates and stuff at your meetings throughout the process. We also have at the beginning the staff interviews, and then we also have engagement with staff, obviously going throughout the process there, working closely with the different departments and Jared. We also have, and Jared mentioned this, a committee. We're recommending a project committee, and we're recommending 5 touch points with them. We see this group as being representative of your larger community, serve as a sounding board, help us with the outreach and engagement. And so their meetings are going to be at milestones to help us not only with that engagement process, but also with, you know, the substantive content of the plan. And then we're also having 2 rounds of public engagement, kind of spaced out there in the middle of the process. And when I say rounds, you know, these haven't been designed yet because we want to do that in concert with staff and the committee and with the most up-to-date information about the pandemic. But in generally, they would involve, you know, could involve some multiple in-person meetings, some online components or virtual meetings. So this isn't necessarily meant to be a one evening, one time thing. We will design these, but they will have multiple ways for people to get involved. And that's why it's shown sort of as an elongated sort of idea there, is that it's not just, you know, a one-time thing. We'll have some different ways people can get involved. Okay, Jamie, if you want to advance. And, you know, ideally we are engaging, you know, in person That's how we like to do our engagement. This is an image of a public meeting. If you can believe it, people are having a lot of fun down in College Station. They're playing a did you know kind of quiz game about their community to learn more about the demographics and existing conditions and trends. And, we try to have all of our meetings, be fun and engaging and get people to have, come out and have a good time thinking about the future. But, based on where we are with the pandemic, we've had to pivot these last, 7-8 months. Engagement does look a little bit different right now. But what we found is that it's not necessarily less productive or less successful. It's just different, and we're going about it in a different way using different tools. So we have done a number of virtual meetings and webinars. Back at the middle of October, we did 7 virtual meetings down for Lexington County, South Carolina. It's a fairly large county, and we were focusing on their different planning areas. But we had an hour virtual meeting with them where we were able to do some education about what a planning process was going to look like, give them some existing conditions and trends. And then because we were, using the Zoom interface, we could break them out into small groups so they could have some small group discussion around a prompt. We also did some live polling using smartphones. So we were able to do quite a bit with them, in this 1 hour meeting. And then we pointed everybody to the project website where we were doing some online engagement with them, continuing that through a couple weeks. We had up different activities on the website. So there was a mapping exercise, there were some more open-ended questions, so people could really have time to engage. And then, back at the, I would say, early fall, we did some safe in-person meetings, contact-free. That image at the bottom is an image of one down in Lebanon, Ohio, where people from signing in and registering to filling out all the different information, giving us input, they were using their smartphones. They were able to drop dots on a map and give us input about different specific ideas in the community, and it fed a big map up on a projection screen. So we've done some different techniques to still bring people together but do it in a safe way. So we're like I said, we like the in-person, we like to bring people together, but we will be designing this process with, the safety in mind, and we've got tools and techniques to do it either way. And we understand that diversity and inclusion is important. We want to make sure that nobody's left out of this process. I think Jamie said it earlier, we want to make sure everybody knows it's a choice to get involved and have their voice heard as part of this process. So we've got a few, techniques or tactics here to think through. We'll be using the committee, relying on them a lot for this, but first we need to identify the hard to reach groups in Manhattan. We know from working, across the country that there are typical groups sometimes that are hard to reach, sometimes the young professionals or a certain area of town. So we'll need to know for Manhattan, like, what is it, where are the hard to reach groups, and then how do we reach out to them? We want to understand past and current efforts, what has worked well in Manhattan in the past or what hasn't, and learn from that so that we can move forward. And then this outreach network, the fourth bullet down, developing an outreach network, this is really about personal word of mouth invitations, and developing this network, we'll be working with the committee, but this is really mapping all the different civic groups, HOAs, PTOs, everybody in the community, trying to map that out and find out the best way to get in touch with those networks. And then after all of our events, whether they're virtual or in person, we will collect demographic information about who participated, because it's really important for us to know that folks that are participating and providing their input, we want to understand who they are and how that matches to the census data and the demographics of the whole community. So we will use this data to understand gaps, and then, if we need to do some follow-up work to reach some of those groups, we will do that.
So in terms of the engagement and the other environmental scan work, at some point we want to be able to articulate at a high level, vision for this work. And, we think about working from the general, like the vision, to the specifics, which are the actions. But we want to start up here and then work our way down. And so we know in order to do that well, we've got to be, when we do engage, we've got to ask the right questions. We got to, do our best to make sense of the answers. We think that, from the initial rounds of engagement, we can begin to discern, the key values that exist. And then, in the vision, I think, we need to find another one of these sweet spots, and that is, thinking big, stretching what the community can do, should do, but also being realistic. And one of the unique things that, we really like about how your project has been conceived is that there is both an internal and an external, view of strategic direction. And so we think that there could be two visions, internal, external, but we think there's this one holistic vision that then serves and drives the work of government and, the larger community. We know that when Jared was doing his introductions, he was talking about budgeting. And we know, even without what is happening to local governments right now, that, there is the need to sort of, balance priorities, and you're going to be doing it internally and externally. So we really see this as, even though I just described it as internal and external, we don't see it as binary that way. We see it really integral in the work. And we think that the committee should be conceived with diverse perspectives in mind, and to have a listening and learning orientation. And as we do this in terms of balancing, different priorities, is to really go about the identification of self-interest and find out where that intersects in that work, and not be concerned about the differences because they're just part of this work. We've talked about this committee, and we're going to continue to work with Jared and the team to sort of on this, but we really think that they're a critical part of, if you really want this strategic plan to have strong critical input, this committee is like the first ripple if you throw a pebble in the pond, going out to the larger community. So, but we don't want to just, create a committee to create a committee. They have to have a very clear purpose. And so we believe strongly in job descriptions and role clarity, and that'll be key to recruiting these people as well as, getting them involved. So we want them to be active in the work, and they'll have opportunities to have you affirm the work that we're all doing with regular check-ins, and this idea of endorsements. The Overland Park, which we've mentioned, one of the great things that they did is they went out and got nearly 80 endorsements from organizations. It could be, in their case, the Johnson County Community College, or hospitals, or employers, social service organizations that endorsed the work. So there was this public input, but also this larger organizational endorsement. Anyway, the committee can help do things, like that. So the last slide here is really about how to use the plan. This is illustrative, but we believe that something like this is helpful to all communities to have like this. If you're going to do strategic planning, have a clear idea about where you do it, how it feeds your other significant work, like the annual budget, the operating budget, the capital improvements budget, your actually work programs for individual departments. But in any given year, we think it's a really good idea to take stock of what you accomplished and what you didn't accomplish, what you need to address, and then feed that into the next year. Just continue that sort of cycle. So we believe strongly in this, this consistent flow and accountability, and how this planning process will help you with your other work. So thank you for that, for listening to that. And I think now, Jared, I could stop sharing and we could do Q&A. Is that what you'd like to do?
Yeah, that'd be great. Are there any specific questions of the City Commission for Jamie or Sarah?
Sure. Thanks, Jared, and thanks, Jamie and Sarah. It was a pleasure to be part of that process, and I'm glad you're here to join us this evening. I will open it up for City Commissioner questions and
Can they hear all right?
Can you hear us okay?
I'm cranking up the volume.
Oh, crank up the volume. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, let's try that.
Yeah, it is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little muffled, but I can hear.
Yeah, maybe it's the mask. Maybe I'll just talk louder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk as loud as you can.
All right, opening it up for city commissioner questions and comments. I just wanted to first of all welcome you for joining us here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do they have any? This is Commissioner Estabrook. I was on the selection committee, and unfortunately, I was having technical difficulties that day and couldn't really voice one of the questions I had very well. If you remember, I was asking about navigating, I think, in Muncie, navigating some of the political landscape and just with the stakeholders. And I think I just wanted to, through this process, I think my hope is that there's a roadmap to the vision, kind of illustrated out very clearly with some real confidence building measures in the short term and immediate and long range. But one of the things, I want to, you touched on it on a lot of your challenges on the slides. Almost all of the challenges kind of incorporate what I'm wondering, and that are hoping that this effort, we have, kind of self-sorted in some ways, and we have silos of community members and leaders. And of course we have Fort Riley, we have Kansas State University, and we have a very vibrant local community. And we all have also different networks. So there's some self-sorting, siloing going on, and we've kind of developed even more so into bubbles during the pandemic. So my hope is that this effort will break through, and we using those unique ways to invite that community engagement of those that may be the most frustrated, and that also may be the most friendly. Finding ways to facilitate that discussion so that ownership piece is there when this is complete in 6 months. And that's a tall order, but I am hopeful that this steering committee and other ways that you have in mind to navigate that process, because at the end of the day, we need to have some confidence back in local government and really all government. That's another dynamic problem, and not just the pandemic. There's a lot of trust issues for perceived reasons, not just locally, just in government in general. And so there's another thing we have to navigate in this process. In my mind, is why I've really been hopeful about is the ability to rebuild that trust and show that we can work together to that common goal and build a strategic plan around it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Those are great comments. I take them as a challenge. I think Sarah and I, we'll work hard to make sure that people see. I know that this has been, I don't think it's overused yet, but it's been used a lot about being in this together, and the phenomenon of sorting. I don't know if you've seen the book, The Big Sort, but that phenomenon is real, and I agree with you. I think it has exaggerated. So anyway, we will work on some particular techniques to try to address that very idea, including like in the communication strategy, describing about what this is about and who's it for.
This is Linda Morse. I'm waving. We have in this community, we have been through a number of comprehensive plans in the city and the county, and some other projects like that, where we have the Aggieville Vision Project, I think, was the last big one we had, where a large group of people, I think, turned out to provide input about what they wanted. So while we haven't done a strategic plan, we have done other kinds of projects. I am, and I don't know that we have a process about because you spoke about a 20 to 25 member steering committee, and I'm interested in how we should find those individuals. And you did mention an application process, and so I'm hoping that we get a cross-section and that it's not loaded with one particular type of person. So that'll be something that I'm especially interested in.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. And I appreciate the fact that you pointed out some other work that you've done. You know, what we want to understand from Jared and others is exactly that. What have you done and what worked well and where did you find challenges? We want to be informed by that. And your point about the committee is also important. You know, that's an incredibly important step in the process, because so much of I think the credibility and engagement kind of ties back to that group. And we'll be very clear in trying to help Jared and others with getting a group that as best you can in that number be reflective. You know, we want anybody out there in Manhattan to look at this group of people and say, oh, that person's about my age, or that person lives in the kind of place where I live, or they've been here, 6 months. I'm a newbie too, or, so we'll be doing that. But thank you very much for those.
I'd also like to be sure that the public can participate. And I know that we're making some technology upgrades here in this room, but even commissioners have not been able to see each other at, here and from here to Zoom. So, I mean, the different, wherever they are, it's not been the best, and the sound has not been good either. So I'm interested in making sure that when a member of the public wants to participate, they're welcomed and we are able to hear them, and so that all has to work. And this is a new day. We're so used to having groups like that come and be in person, and so this virtual is a totally different ball of that we have to work through and make sure it doesn't fail.
Other comments? Oh, sorry.
Before we move on, Commissioner Morris, just to give you a little bit more understanding of the process that we're going through, Sarah and I have had some initial conversations about how we're going to approach that. They've done this quite a few times, so they have some good templates of creating that application form, getting the right information from individuals. They've created matrices that we can use to help look at that final list and see, are there people missing from this? So there's good ways of doing that. Some initial thoughts that we've had from the process is here over the next week, developing that application, getting it out, promoting that to the community. I'm even speaking over lunch on Thursday to the Hype Young Professionals group to let them know about advisory boards as well as this steering committee that's kind of being formed. So getting that information out to folks so that they can apply maybe through the end of December. One group that's kind of already met and understands the process is our steering committee, so that they could be a potential group that can look at these applications and help provide some guidance or help us understand where we're missing so we can reach out to more people. But then ultimately bringing that back to the commission so that you can see that as well.
Thanks, Jared. Other questions? So, when we had those, the applications, they were really good, high-quality applications, and even the 4 candidates that we interviewed, top of the line. The reason we picked Planning Next is the timeline and the deliverables, and the way we felt like it was more manageable, the way they were presenting and discussing the issues that we wanted. The common themes that came up during our discussions was community needs and city operational needs. And I think that's the balance we're trying to find with this. So the strategic plan is to figure out what the operational needs are first and make that the strategic plan even far after we're done and gone, so that when it comes to budgets and such, we are constantly focused on where we need to be. Is it the OEI, Operational Excellence Initiative? I hope I said that right. So that's part of the reason we want to do this, so that we don't get blindsided with other things. And the community engagement piece is also to that effect, because it does require staffing, it does require certain needs that need to be put in place, and to make sure that we are addressing all of those. 6 months is a short timeline, and it's going to be a challenge during the pandemic, but I feel like you said, if the committee gets back together and helps with the process, and hopefully at some point during this pandemic we can have some larger in-person gatherings, that would be helpful. I'm looking forward to the process and keeping everybody engaged during these discussions. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mayor, I was gonna
Go ahead.
add one thing. Just for you guys, if you can hear me playing next, this strategic plan, I think, is the idea of a strategic plan is already kind of at the tips of people's are the front of their thoughts, in that we're receiving questions. Even the Parks and Rec, our advisory board, received questions regarding, priorities and fees and things, that discussion that's happening in our community. And yet the direction in some ways goes back to, all right, let's get you part of the strategic plan committee and put that input and where you're at in that. And I think that's going to happen over a lot of issues in the next 6 months. But I bring that up because, I've heard several people in the community, I've heard at our commission meetings, this idea that we need to kind of have a hierarchy of priorities if we get into a situation where we do have to pull back and make any kind of cuts. And so that ties directly, that Parks and Rec fee type of situation I listened to, ties directly into this idea. If we had a strategic plan, if we had that to look at, and we had specific areas where the community is expressed through the strategic plan that is a top priority, we can use that in that decision making for the budget. So since this is new, maybe I'm over explaining it on purpose, but it's new to our community. And I think tying the strategic plan, because we have a little bit of visioning fatigue. We've had a lot of different slogans offered in our community, but we haven't had a strategic plan before that's tied to specific outcomes and fiscal amounts. And I think that's really important to kind of couple those three things.
No, thank you. And what you just said and what some of the others have said, I think are really helpful to Sarah and me as we talk about how to communicate what this is, right? Because as you said, people have different needs, they have different thoughts, sometimes use the same words for different things. So what this process is and how it helps you, I think is a really key early task that we need to tackle.
Okay, so this is Mayor Reddy. So what we have in front of us is this a voting item?
This is a discussion item.
It's a discussion item.
So the selection, in traditional RFPs, usually we have this process where the city commission authorizes us to go negotiate that process. That's not needed. It's just kind of part of the process. So this was an opportunity for us to get in front of you to let you all know that the selection committee made its recommendation for planning next. City administration is going to work on that negotiation of that agreement, which is, the first draft is what you have in front of you, and we'll work with them on that. We're going to come back that first meeting in January 5th, to approve that contract, that scope of services, so we can hit the ground running January 2021.
Okay. Thank you, Jared. Are there any other comments or anything for Jared or Jamie and Sarah? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Too. Okay, we have one last agenda item. Let me see if I can grab that. And I will speak to this a little bit. This is the Manhattan or the Community Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Task Force. Originally, I brought this up back in summer. I think it was actually June or August, I believe. And at that time, there was a lot of racial tension, not only in our community, but within our nation. And there was lots of discussions going on, and we felt we needed to have further discussions about this. And we reviewed we have a Human Rights and Services Board presently for the City Commission, and they have some structures in place and some goals already in place. So I felt it would be necessary to, first of all, explain why we are discussing this and to see how we can utilize our Human Rights Advisory Board a little bit better than what it is right now. The university, Kansas State University, has a diversity Office of Diversity, as well as a multicultural office and an international students office. USD 383 has a diversity committee, and there's other pockets within our community that also have organizations that dive into particular issues within their own culture or race and needs. Flint Hills Human Rights Project being one of them, Black Lives Matter movement being one of them. We have a Alianza group at Kansas State University, HALO at Kansas State University, and we have multiple other organizations. I think as we know we are a good community, we know we do a lot of right things, but they are all kind of working on their own, and there isn't a place where we can get all of these resources together. If you're an immigrant, or if you're a student that came on here on a certain visa and you want to get a job, or if you have students that speak, or even a population that speaks a variety of languages, or maybe you're not able in some of these areas to have access to what we have for a variety of reasons. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to have a Community Diversity and Equity Inclusion Task Force made up of about 20 to 25 people from an array of organizations that already have experts in place, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel of any kind. There are organizations already within some of these structures, such as the university and such as Fort Riley, as well as USD 383, that we can kind of consolidate for our own city and make sure we are more welcoming and inclusive. This also requires, some of the organizations I had in mind were the Flint Hills Human Rights Project, like I had mentioned. There's the Black Student Union. We have city organizations and county organizations, Flint Hills Regional Council, the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. So there's a whole variety of them. And I think in order to build our workforce as well, one of the reasons we need to continue to grow is because those individuals are going to leave our community and go off to other communities. Kansas does have a large immigration population. They do have a lot of other languages, and we have a lot of youth and a lot of LGBT community, but they don't really have access to resources in Manhattan or have a reason to stay. I think when we look at some of our sports or families or athletes, we don't give them a reason to stay. We don't have either the businesses that are involving them or adapt to their cultures. And I think those are the discussions I would like for us to have, or for this task force to have, and make sure we are becoming that community that we want to be for the future. So with that, I will open up for discussion between all the city commissioners, and I'm hoping to have a committee in place, hopefully by December 15th, our next meeting, because we don't have 2 more meetings, or by January 5th. But it is worth this discussion to have for our community.
Yeah, I want to make just one comment. You know, I don't know, I guess we've been asking for 2 years about this Housing Advisory Board, and we got funding for it. Yet we can't seem to get that on the agenda, but this one just appeared this morning. And my question is, what's the priority here? mean, we put a sales tax in place, and we got funding for a housing advisory board, which is one of the subsets of this, yet we can't seem to get it on the agenda. And that's really my issue. I don't understand that at all. You know, for 2 years we've been working on that. You know, that was one of Commissioner McGee's big things, you know, when he was here. Yet, no matter how many times we talk about it, it doesn't appear on the agenda. But other things just miraculously appear. That's disturbing.
Well, I don't know about miraculous, but this is what we are discussing tonight.
To clarify, I think the Housing Advisory Board's on the agenda for next time, at our next meeting, December 15th. And we've talked about it a couple times in a discussion setting, I think. And so my understanding is it's on the agenda. It's in our planning sheets. It should be there.
That's correct.
Well, that's good, because I'm a little bit confused on the planning thing, because when you look at it, it doesn't include everything that's on the agenda. And we seem to be doing that more and more, yet we talk a good show about transparency. But in either case, on this particular thing here, my question is the Human Services Advisory Board, I haven't heard from them, do they want to do this? Because apparently this is set up where this task force reports to them, not the commission. And so my question is, you know, what are their thoughts on this? Because I didn't get anything about that from them.
Right. So the Human Rights Advisory Board was originally set up for the sexual identity, sexual orientation, gender identity piece when we had that in place. I had talked to their chair a few months ago when I originally thought about this, and they right now are in a spot where they can actually address some of these issues or have some more reason for them to be in place and to be more active. The few people that I did talk to, they want to have more to do, and this is right up their alley. But we can bring them in to have it in front of them as a discussion. But as a commission, it's also part of our responsibility and duty to make sure that we are also directing certain boards in what we want for the city of Manhattan.
Yeah, I just see this as it's like a secondary board to a board we already have. And, you know, if they're all for it and want to do it, then perhaps they should appoint the people and not the commission, because it's, you know, it's down a couple levels below. And, you know, it's an interesting, you know, purpose statement here. It looks almost like a Mission Impossible, so I wish them luck, you know, on that. But, you know, I'm not sure it'll accomplish much. I'm not sure it'll do any harm either from that standpoint. And you know, the selection of organizations that are listed here is possible. That's interesting, but there may be several other ones out there that want to participate that you haven't included in here.
It's true.
So I find that I wasn't here in 2016, and I find these two pieces here of what the role, the powers and duties of the Human Rights and Services Board to be interesting, because I think what the mayor was just addressing, the absence of some of these numbered points here, the investigative power, the complaint process, that type of stuff was a primary function of that Human Rights and Services Board based on the 2016 duties. And I've gotten feedback from at least two, including the chair of the Human Rights and Services Board, as we haven't heard from them. What are they doing? Well, we haven't heard. That's a little bit of the issue. So what they've been receptive to, and Commissioner Morris, I don't want to speak for her, but we both have served on the Flint Hills Human Rights Project, and there's overlap there on those board members, and they've indicated a lack of agenda items or things to do, and so reviewing what are their powers and duties, it looks to be, you know, A through D here fits the role. And so my understanding would be a task force can be created by the commission or recommended to be created by the commission, and then the proper channel for them to get, because they may have more pointed questions than we do, to vet that plan or that proposal. And as I read this, it kind of reminded me of a lot of the commentary about the strategic plan of don't we have enough people in our community to figure this problem out? Why don't they get together and do it? This is kind of what that looks like, I think, as far as if we're saying there is a problem with diversity, inclusion, and then there's enough people in our community, potentially on this task force, representatives from different groups that could either identify that problem, and then the Human Rights and Services Board is recommending, their charge is to recommend to the governing body equal opportunity civil rights policies, procedures, and programs which will protect against discrimination, promote health and safety and welfare. So seems like it would give them some, things to do, and that's what I've heard they've been asking for.
My initial response to they don't have any agenda items is maybe we're looking for problems that don't exist, or we're trying to find Manhattan. We talk about Manhattan being a nice, relatively, generally nice place to live, and people generally get along pretty well. And I'm sure there's always going to be pockets of issues where people are discriminated against by some idiot. But that may be one of the things, if they don't have much to work on, then maybe there's not really a problem that needs to be addressed. Obviously, I don't think Manhattan has a systemic problem, but that's the initial thing that comes to mind. Well, if they don't have anything to work on, well, then maybe we don't have any problems. That may not be the case. That is one way to look at it, though. The other thing is a task force begs the idea of a limited period of time. We're gonna have a task force, we're gonna get together for a year, solve this problem, whatever. Is that what you're envisioning, or are you envisioning this thing to be a lifetime appointment that continues to exist long into the next decade?
No, I think that's a great question. So one of the things we did this year was have the Manhattan Recovery Task Force, and hopefully that has a date, an end date. So right now they meet bi-weekly. They were meeting weekly, and now they're meeting bi-weekly, and eventually that'll stop. We have the Riley County Mental Health Task Force, which has been going on for years. And we've had several proposals and initiatives that came out of that, just like the Recovery Task Force had several proposals that came out of that task force. So this can end whenever we want it to end, or it can be just a year and come up with ideas. The thing is not to develop new ideas. The thing is to consolidate some of those ideas. And just because an organization doesn't have enough to do or doesn't have anything to do doesn't mean we don't have a problem. It is just that most people don't even know we have it. Most people don't even know we have a Human Rights Commission. They don't even know that it exists. These issues, there is systemic racism in our community, and you don't have to agree with that. But I feel as a woman of color, I can speak to that. I think there's these issues with immigration. I get emails all the time with H-1 visas or with work permits and things of that sort. I do know that there's students at USD 383, the reason they have the Diversity Commission in place is they recognize they have over 30 languages or more in their own school, and how to address that. As a school teacher, I know that each individual student has certain abilities and individuals with disabilities that may or may not be recognized. We have a good community in the sense that we keep tapping into the same people, so the same people are always getting those roles. So anywhere you go, even the Manhattan Chamber, they have the Leadership Academy. All one race and one set of lens. That doesn't help everybody else because we keep tapping into our own friend circle. So we need to broaden that space. Otherwise, we won't feel it, but our future generations will feel it, our workforce will feel it, and our economy will feel it, because other communities are going to get ahead of us. So the students at the university need a reason to stay once they get their degrees. And it's not just a job, it's an environment, it's a welcoming space, an inclusive community. And that's what we need to work towards and build towards. I feel hopeful for this task force. I think it's a place to start, and it's a good place to see where it will go. But if we never have that discussion, we will never know.
Mayor, I was gonna make a quick comment. I think also part of their charges are education, and it's helpful to me, diversity, equity, inclusion includes more than just race and gender. And so there's elements to that education of the community. I saw on the veterans, mental health, socioeconomic status, those types of conversation, and then a consolidation, like you're talking about, a clearinghouse of HR policies. We have all these type of, I think, rather than being defensive, if we feel we're good as a community, we have these pockets of strength, why not consolidate them and actually give the opportunity of I think there's economic development potential, people looking at Manhattan saying, oh, look, you're doing these, you have this group. Right now, we don't have this group in a way that is marketable. And the other part to that of, if they're not doing anything, to Commissioner Haddisall's point, I think I've had the experience in the last couple of years working around some people that have been minorities, or not have been, but are minorities, but have been disenfranchised, or they don't know how to engage. And so, and it's not necessarily, this is a way to begin that process for them, I think, as a task force. If I've gotten input from people that they want to explore it. So I don't think it hurts anything at all, and it might actually give us a kind of an extra edge on other communities.
Linda Morse, from an historical perspective, some years ago, the representatives of the city and the school district and K-State all came together and worked as a group, collective group, year after year for the Martin Luther King Planning Committee. And the idea was that each holiday period for the community planned events before Martin Luther King Day is how it's kind of turned out, and then the university planned them after the King Day, because then they had gone into session and into school and were gearing up. And I thought that worked very well, but it meant working together. That I know that now there's a campus group that's separate and a community group. But there's more than one day or 1 week a year. And this is something that I have participated in the conversations on race for the last several years. There's been sometimes one a year or two a year. That's a well put together program. About a year ago, there was one of those sessions at Potter's Hall, and there were over 100 people there, because they were interested and are interested in that, in talking to each other and working on how we can be a better community, be better people, I think, and not as judgmental and negative. So my understanding from some years ago about the Human Rights and Services Board was that it was focused on complaints, and there just haven't been any complaints. That doesn't mean that we don't have issues here in the community. And several years ago, when our commission wanted to add the words sexual orientation and gender identity, 5 words, to the discrimination policy. It was very divisive in the community. Except for wearing masks, I've never seen anything quite as disruptive and divisive in the community. But I have not, and when we asked the Human Rights and Services Board for a recommendation, they kind of, were divided. They had big meetings, stalled things for a couple of months while they worked through it, and finally came forth with a recommendation to support it, by 1 vote because it was split, I think, something like that. So I'm not so sure that I want to, and I don't really support investing totally in the Human Rights and Services Board. I think we're better off with a more organic kind of a task force with some good leadership, you know. We can work through them when it comes to making formal policy maybe, but there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place with regard to race and gender, and as long as we have boards that are all one race and one sex, that is not, we aren't really inviting the community in. 50% of the population are women, roughly. I know that there are fewer, I don't know the minority population or in Manhattan. I'm not supposed to use that word. What is it I'm supposed to say? I forgot.
It's all right.
I just think it's, the discussions are going on all over the country. And Manhattan, Kansas is no different than those other cities, communities. In many ways, we're just smaller, but we have an educated community, and we need to have these discussions. So I think that's enough said.
Can I get any history on the, because my understanding is the Human Rights and Services Board recommended 5-1 on March 2016, but they, what I don't have clarity on is the functionality of that board, and that there is no Human Rights Commission that investigates complaints anymore. That's completely gone, and that changed on that vote from this 2016 when you were adding sexual orientation and identity. You removed the entire investigation and complaint process from the city, is my understanding of what I read.
That's the point on that, and that was the whole contention issue, was that we didn't want a human rights board investigating citizens and having more power than a judge did. And so the way the ordinance was crafted, and that's what caused it to pass on a 5-0 vote, was this went to the municipal judge.
Right.
So if you've got a complaint, it goes to the judge. It's not a citizen's kangaroo court, which is what the other one was. And that's what it was, and that's what the contention was among everybody. So we don't want this to be a body that tries people.
So,
and we don't need to go down that route if that's the intention here, because that's going to upset a lot of people.
I think I wanted to clarify that because I don't know that that's widely understood. And the way, so to say that I don't, you know, Commissioner Moore's talking about not going through the Human Rights and Services Board seems to be couched in that idea that their body, they were created around a complaint, or their job is to investigate complaints, which isn't what they do. Instead, their job seems to be to recommend policy that covers all the human rights and and then also the proposals, provide education outreach, and then accept contributions from, you know, any person that has proposals, which this is a proposal. So anyway, that seems the appropriate, in my mind, function of what they're doing now, rather than, I just don't want us to get lost on a contentious issue that existed around a complaint process that is completely not in the city's realm anymore.
I just have not been the recipient of one recommendation from them. I don't see them as an active board, and the city administration would have to empower them in ways that they haven't been empowered in the past to consider some of these issues.
So just to clarify, if I could, City Manager Ron Fear, essentially the other aspect of the switching the role was that the city's process was somewhat duplicative of the state process, and really the city's process was meant to try and reconcile differences locally without a hammer. So it was, more folks would rather go to the state with their complaint, which has more authority to enforce. So the goal when we added the additional elements was to convert them to more of an advisory board role, similar to other city advisory boards. So I think it is pertinent for them, if you want to give them a subject or a certain aspect and ask for feedback, or to develop processes and work towards policy. I think that is appropriate, but it's also, if you want to do like we're doing with the Recovery Task Force, that's okay too.
Thank you, Ron. Did you want to say something, Mark?
I was just gonna, my thought isn't that, the commission and the mayor go through the process of deciding the task force. They're just to carry out this, objective on here to develop a plan that consists of goals and benchmarks. So they're developing a plan by consolidating that information, but then the Human Rights Advisory Board, Human Rights and Services Advisory Board is able to review and vet that a little bit before it comes to the commission. That's the role that they have, in the sense of not creating the task force, but being a buffer between the commission and the task force itself.
They could be the group that brings the recommendation, being part of that group. So those are some details we can work out for December 15th. I think this is not a complaint piece. This is a process to make sure everybody knows what these organizations already have in place. We don't know what they have in place. And two, to make sure that if there are policies or things that are happening in our community that we can change or address a little bit better, then this organization, this task force can discuss those items, such as the Recovery Task Force said we should do something for Manhattan is Open and Safe. And then we came up with the website for Manhattan is Safe and Open. I'm not thinking at that scale, but there are already things in place that we haven't really fully discussed or utilized, and there hasn't been a space for that kind of discussion.
I still see it as redundant. I mean, you've got a intent and scope, then change the intent and scope of the Human Rights Services Board. Increase the number of people on it and drive on. Or if the Human Rights and Services Board is inept, which is sort of what I'm hearing, then fire them and replace it with a task force. But otherwise it doesn't make sense. You've got two groups doing the same thing, and all you've done is created more bureaucracy. One group's going to report to another one, who's then finally going to report to us. I don't see that as streamlining anything, but I'm not enamored by the idea. I'm not 100% opposed to it either.
I just, I'm all for people coming up with good policy that we can consider. The powers and duties thing, the investigative arm of stuff is what caught my attention early on, and so I'm a little uneasy about the idea of some of the groups you named are activist groups. I'm a little concerned about activist groups sort of being the diversity, equity, and inclusion police, for lack of a better term. And I obviously, if the state has a process for I don't know. That's probably the problem. Is it's hard to get. It must be hard to get complaints about sexual discrimination, age discrimination, veterans discrimination, whatever, heard, decided, ruled upon, or something, because that's if that's the kind of the problem we're trying to solve. What is that approach right now, and is it not available for the average person? Do they have to drive to Topeka? Do people not know about it, or is there not a thing in place for people to try to? Short of this new task force, is there not something already in place that addresses that?
I just would say that, again, this is where the confusion comes from, is that there isn't that in the current roles and duties don't have an investigative or complaint arm, and I don't think the mayor is proposing that comes back. So all of that's out the window. This is just an information organization, consolidation, clearinghouse, nothing punitive, and just for sake of, I had to read about it earlier, I think there was 3 complaints or, very minimal complaints that came through. And then, so I don't think the threshold's so hard. It may just be that there isn't a lot of complaints.
That's fine. So if you'd strike chapter 10, section 3 out of there, or paragraph 3 about conducting investigation and board and stuff. then-
Well, that's the old one. I think if you look
Is
at the
there-
new one that's current,
Oh,
The current,
so they're.
that's
let-
the prior to 2016. Well, crap. Never mind. Well, I'll read it.
Dramatically changed
I
after.
think you accomplished the goal by just changing the intent of the Human Rights Services Board. Just rewrite their mission
yeah, we can,
to
I
what you
think,
got on this page and just say, okay, you guys are in charge of education, language, individual public safety, economic opportunity, and give us information on that. And don't worry about a task force, just fix the board. Problem seems to be the board, is what I'm hearing.
no, the
Let's
problem
change it.
is not the board. The board served a different purpose. The reason for the task force, and we can get rid of the board if we want. That's not even the thing here. The thing with the task force is to make sure we have people discussing these issues from where they are at, so we can make resources and all of those voices being heard to make it a more diverse community and understanding of that. It should not just be a one Human Rights Advisory Board or whatever that board is currently, and just leave it at that without having a bigger, larger discussion. After a few, I think at least a year of this being in place and those discussions, then we can see if we want to dissolve it or not. The purpose of the Diversity Committee at USD 383, it composes about 25 to 30 people on it. I get their emails all the time, and they do make recommendations and suggestions to their principals and to their Board of Education and their administrators. So we can substitute one for the other if that's the route we want to go, because I'm not sure about the all of these areas about the Human Rights Advisory Board in and of itself. But I see the vision for the task force is very broad, and it's not a punitive nature so much as to onboard people into what we have, into the community and the organizations we have in place.
Yeah, I think I understand that, but I don't think we should have this as a voting item next week. It hasn't been discussed. I mean, it got thrown on here at the last minute, and I haven't gotten any feedback from anyone out there because nobody was aware of it, basically. And I think there's a number of rabbits have to be run down the holes here on this. And I also think 25, any committees with 25 people never get anything done.
Well, Recovery Advisory Board.
They're just
yeah.
incredible when they have that many, and so the size of that, troubles me a little bit. And then, we need to really nail down in detail the selection process. Is it going to be a special interest group that automatically gets a seat? Or is it going to be a person? And there's a number of things, and I really would like to hear from the Human Rights Services Board, since, they're not here tonight. They weren't invited. I didn't get any emails from them, and so we probably need another discussion session on this with plenty of warning so that people can come in and give their say so we can nail this thing down.
I have a question about the process. I could be wrong. I don't recall. Maybe I don't. Did we appoint as a commission the recovery task force? We did.
I made the
So-
appointments, and it was approved by the commission.
I'm asking. So we didn't, as a commission, have an actual vote on that, right? It was giving the mayor direction and support. Was there even a vote on that?
There was not a formal vote.
So I guess the process, two things. One, the task force is, by definition, a task force is action driven. It's oriented. It's doing work. It's a working body. The advisory board is a deliberative body that is going to review that work that the working body did, and make tweaks and, have a buffer between the governing body and their advisory role. So I don't know that there even needs to be a vote at all. The mayor could ask, suggest to the Human Rights and Services Board that, or let them know, notify them that she's organizing a task force. And this is the plan. In the same way, I don't know that it needs to be, I'm happy to vote on it, but I'm also understanding it doesn't need to be a vote if it's gonna cause more heartburn than necessary.
But, my question on that is, we're just gonna have mayors form all kinds of task forces? It's a ceremonial position. You don't get to go out and just create stuff. Just like you can't create a board, it's got to be voted on. And that's how we're set up. And so that's gonna be, there's some contentious issues that people have. You're just gonna create these things. And I don't know, the recovery task force sound like a good idea, but again, huge body, I'm not sure they accomplish much. Another massive amount.
The recovery task force accomplished quite a bit, actually, in my opinion, in the short time frame that they had.
So I do think it would be appropriate for the commission to concur with the appointments. That would be proper.
So there's been a lot of interest by people that want to be on this and co-chair it and such. We can discuss those items, but I think it would be good to have it on the December 15th agenda item and pass it at that point.
I don't want to see it voted on December 15th because people aren't going to have time to give us the feedback. That gives them, less than a week, and we're in the holiday period and everything. It's not a coronavirus issue. I think it would pass on one vote, right, the way we've got it set up now, instead of two. It would pass on one reading. And some people are going to have issues with that. It's just not an emergency. And I'd like to see us devote our effort, as I said in the beginning, on this housing board. That's the one that's my priority right now. This one's got to take the back seat until we get that one done, which is my point. And the staff can't probably do both, so we need to get the housing one nailed. And we're going to have the same discussions on that. We don't know who we're going to put on that board or what their scope is and all that. It's very difficult. So I'd rather spend the time on that and not on this right now. This can wait.
I see a big difference between a formal advisory board and a task force that I think of as less formal. The recovery task force, there have been other task forces here in the community that last for a while and then move on. I think it's something that this community needs, is the opportunity to have those conversations. And I'm interested in setting something like that up and working on it. So it's a reasonable request for something less than formal, which is what we usually do. We have rules for everything. A task force doesn't have those kinds of rules. They're more just pulling people together. So I think it's a good idea.
I don't know why anyone would want to stand in the way of 25 to 30 or 100 people that wanted to get together and solve an impossible problem. So why would we not let them if they're interested? And I don't know how much work it'll take, but I think to be fair, this year has been charged with a lot of issues that surround these tensions and racial and diversity and inclusion. And so it may not be under the emergency of a pandemic, but it is certainly an issue that has caused some crises, not just in national, but even locally. There's been all kinds of marches and things. It's relevant. I think there's people that want to voice and vent their energy into this task force. Why would the commission stop them?
And I guess
Not saying that, just saying that we need to have, another discussion session and get the people involved. There's none here.
well, it almost sounds like this thing could function totally independent of the commission, other than the mayor saying, hey, why don't you guys get this thing started? And if they're not really a subset of the Human Rights and Services Board, and all they're gonna do is be advisory, I'm not sure, yeah, why does the commission sort of need to be involved? If it's a good idea, it's almost sort of outside the realm of the city, and unless the city's gonna have a secretary there taking notes, and you're gonna have staff people involved with it, which, if you got volunteers to do all that stuff, it almost just seems like you should, yeah, get a bunch of people together at somebody's basement, socially distanced, and have a bunch of discussion, and then when they come up with some good ideas, have somebody present it either to the Human Rights Board or bring it to us. It almost seems like it could be totally unconnected, other than mayor driving the appointments of it to a task force. It almost seems like it could be unrelated to the city commission, just based on, if it's a good idea, then somebody should move forward with it without necessarily having to be a city-driven task force. And I know sometimes the chamber does, years ago, they did the blank paper economic development thing. They had, and it was driven by the chamber. And then they brought their findings to the commission, and the commission moved forward with whatever parts were appropriate. But that's, yeah, I'm not even sure exactly why other than, yeah, it's sort of, part of it would be under the Human Rights Board, but it just sounds like it might be a good idea to do it, and it should happen. Does it need to happen sort of under the realm of the commission, I guess is my only question.
Well, it was going to have the city staff person on it to be a liaison, just like we would for other, like the task force had for the recovery task force, or even the Riley County Mental Health Task Force has a liaison on it. So something of that nature, but it is independent of other organizations in the city, so it doesn't need formalization of such things. Like I said, the recovery task force didn't, the mental health task force didn't. That's still continuing, and Commissioner McCullough is not even a commissioner anymore. But they still have that going on with Robin Cole and some of the county commissioner and myself attending those meetings. And that's how we got the co-responders and everything else going from that type of a task force.
Mayor, I'll just respond real quick. I think the meat of what the goal for that task force is that consolidation clearinghouse and breaking down those silos, because I know we've heard Tammy talk about how, you know, there's this, even the city staff try to do their own diversity type of bringing, you know, and have, those things exist all over our community. It makes sense to me to have a focused period of time that you share and do that, so then it's done and you have the report and here it is. And it in my mind wouldn't be inappropriate. It would be beneficial for the city to say do that, especially when our own staff have tried to do it, and I know the police have tried to do it and the school district have tried to do it all independently.
So this is City Manager Ron Fear. The issue becomes, and what we did with the Recovery Task Force, because we kind of started on that process too, where the Recovery Task Force was just going to be this generic group of 2 co-chairs, but it had to have some kind of organization. But if it's a group that either a city commissioner or mayor is involved in forming officially in their official capacity, or this body, then it has to comply with the Open Meetings Act. So if it's just some other generic group that one of you get invited to attend, that's a little different, you know, and I think the Mental Health Task Force has kind of morphed into that, because it's not something we support. So anyway, that's the comment I would make. And so there isn't this ability for, if one of you in your official capacity goes out and wants to start something, you should do it at least the majority blessing of your fellow commissioners, if you want staff to support it.
Yeah, I agree with that, and this has the City of Manhattan Human Resources involved, so we got all kinds of staff drug into it. And it also has Riley County Human Resources. Is the county signed off on this?
I was going to say, those were just ideas. They don't have to be involved in anything.
Okay, but-
It's just to have, if they want representation on it. These were just fluid ideas that are out here.
Okay,
Nothing is
that wasn't
concrete.
clear, you know, that's why I say, I think, you know, the idea, you know, it needs to be brainstormed to a greater length. It's not ready for a vote next week.
I believe we can go ahead and organize it. I don't think it's such a huge discussion about any kind of financial matters or anything of that sort. This is going to be an organization or a task force that discusses these issues and collaborates on them and brings forth the ideas. I don't see it as being, it took me this long just to even get it here because there was so many other things going on in our community that by the time we got it here, it took a little while, but I didn't think it was going to take this long of a discussion for it. I felt it was going to be one of those things from what we were discussing along all of these other parameters.
Took us
that this
over
is
2
something
years
very-
to come to a conclusion on the housing one, so it shouldn't be surprising.
This-
Everything takes a while.
But can I make a suggestion? So we're discussing this tonight, and so I think that list I was looking through, you know, potentially, and it's not hard, any of that, but if the goal is December 15th, what, I mean, the city staff, city manager would need, what group, and maybe these need to be better organized into groups, or, you know, however you, rather than specific organizations, as a representative from a type of group. If there's sections missing, that could be accomplished in the next couple days, I would think, to then achieve the purpose. Not necessarily vetting the names of the people, because then that is part of the advise and consent later of who serves on the committee post-Jan. It's not like they're gonna meet over Christmas. They're gonna, you know, need to be accepted and go through that vetting process of who's on it, but it shouldn't be difficult for the commission to agree on, between now and then, on the types of entities or groups that should have some type of voice in a diversity, inclusion, equity discussion, thinking about, again, socioeconomic, all the protected classes that are listed in the, I think that's doable.
Yes, I've been here long enough to know that's probably not doable in a week, in a reasonable fashion, simply because what we need is a draft, and we need a discussion of the draft, and we need the population to get involved, and they're not involved. They don't know, and we gotta get a draft out there first, and let them come out and talk about it, and decide what the makeup of this should be. You know, we talk a good show on transparency, but now we wanna run this thing through in 2 consecutive meetings, and just say, oh, it'll be okay. And I have no clue what the majority of the folks out there think about it, because I haven't gotten any feedback. And it isn't gonna happen between now and the 15th. And so that's my concern. We can do this, it's great.
Yeah.
But let's do it right if we're gonna do it.
I do know that some of the other diversity commissions and committees and task forces that are based on diversity have a lot of people that come on all the time. It's not like a structure in where you have to belong to this organization, and this organization. That's what makes it inclusive, because it's a welcoming base to people that are from a variety of organizations to be represented as part of this. But I do think we need to move forward on it, to have it on the December 15th and start moving along on the task force. As far as vetting and all of that and adding other people to it or other organizations, that's all right. But I will say, most of the organizations are already involved in such as, you know, we have the chamber here, we have the Flint Hills Regional Council, kind of similar to what we had on the recovery task force groups. The work is very similar, except it's more towards the diversity inclusion aspect, whereas the recovery task force was mostly focused on the businesses. And I think we can still do it. I think there is a vetting process. I think people can email us even from now till December, even till January 5th, people can email us. There's nothing as far as a conversation piece. But I think the aspect to this is there isn't a financial burden or a grant or something that we are waiting for or dependent on for any of this to happen.
I think it's doable. We have to just, give it some shape and make up our minds to that. And, you know, it could report, make recommendations to the mayor and to the Human Rights and Services Board. There are lots of ways we can contour this. We can describe these organizations in generic terms so we don't leave some out. I mean, I'm not sure how to, what form it'll take on the 15th, but I think it's reasonable. And I really don't want to put it off any longer. I think it should have been done a long time ago, I suppose.
So I want to ask Ron a question, and can the city staff create something in that short a time for a vote by the 15th? I mean, that would specific, because this document here doesn't do it.
I think it'll be a challenge. It could be something we could do conceptually. I don't think it'll have all the details.
Okay.
But we would need your help, and maybe the 15th we have another discussion and you potentially could take action on the 5th.
Yeah, that would, I think, be a more reasonable timeline. I mean, I see how things work. I mean, it's not as simple as you portray it, and especially when we get the population involved.
I don't know what that means exactly by getting the population involved. I think people will be vocal and talk about it. Somehow you think like they're going to, it is a welcoming community, and I think I look forward to those discussions, but I haven't, in all the times that I've talked about diversity, I haven't received negative attacks about it.
Yeah, I'm not saying there is. I mean, maybe there'll be a whole bunch of people that come in and say, this is great. We got one email today. I think one guy said he thought this was a great idea. It came in. I don't know if you read that or not, but he was all for pursuing this. And that's good, because if we have that discussion, then we can get the people that will actually put in the time and effort to do what I think your intent is on this. And that's important, but I think the message just has to get out, because I get a lot of emails all the time, people saying, what's on the agenda? Why don't I know what's going on? How come I find out about this afterwards? And that was all that transparency argument. And there's no reason to rush things. And I think it overburdens the staff. I'm still interested in their priority being the housing issue in that particular board and this one next. And let's get these things right, because we haven't even gotten legal involved yet. And I don't know what, there's always something that comes up there when we start drafting an ordinance, and legal looks at it and says, oh guys, you forgot about X, Y, Z, and we've always got to go back and relook it. So I'm just saying, slow down a little bit. We can get it done, but it doesn't need to be done that fast.
I appreciated your offer to get the concept pulled together, even if we don't have all the details, so that we can have another discussion on December 15th.
And if it's a discussion item on the 15th, I'm all for it. I just don't want it to be
I would like for it to
voted.
be a voting item on the 15th. I think we can have something voted on by the 15th on this, mainly because I feel like you're trying to be obstructing it to a certain level. The terms
No, we
and
understand. We're
the
not-
snickering and all of this sound kind of,
We're not going to agree. You want to vote on the 15th, and the three of you can, that's fine. I just don't want to vote on the 15th. That's pretty simple. It's black and white.
that's not what you were saying before, but okay.
I think it would be nice to have the whole commission support it, because it's it seems to be a group of people that just want to try to give us better information without us hiring a consultant or hiring a diversity commit. I mean, like, this is the no-nonsense way to do it that you complain about, Commissioner Butler. It seems to be the only hesitancy you have is the timing, and I understand that, and I think I'm sympathetic to that. But at the same time, I've heard for the last 6 months, why aren't we doing something? And we've even received feedback from, you said yourself, a constituent wrote you today. So you have actually, the public has somebody weighed in. There's 95% of what we do, the public doesn't weigh in at all.
Yeah, we've got, yeah,
So
we've got.
this one's already got public weighing in
Got
on
one,
it.
and you're correct, I don't want to hire a consultant to do this, I'm not a big fan of consultants. But I would just like to get more community involvement in it, and I'd like to have a document that's a little bit more refined, and we're just not there yet in my mind. And that isn't going to change between now and next week.
Okay, so you have 3 votes to at least get a conceptual plan for December 15th, so we can have something to work with. And I do think we already have a lot to work with. I do believe we'll have public comment as the public sees fit for any discussion item. And even now, as we're talking right now, I don't know who's watching and who's not watching, but we have Facebook, we have the TV, and we have our website where people can follow the discussions, and probably plenty of feedback on that right there. So we'll see where it goes.
I like the idea that they can sign up to automatically receive the notifications from the city, all of the boards, the city commission, the Human Rights and Services Board, Planning Board, everything. So, I mean, if someone really is interested in being engaged, we have, I think, enough avenues for them to be informed. And there's nobody here tonight, but there wasn't a lot of notice of the change either, but of the agenda item. But anyway, there'll be an opportunity on the 15th, and I would be interested in voting to support the Diversity Task Force.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.